Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Community Environment and Partnerships. As usual, I need to report that there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. Please switch off your phones or turn them to silent. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify, Chair? There was a meeting last week involving a private briefing with the County Council on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee, which was cancelled. Can I clarify, have you had a telephone call from Maria Miller at all this afternoon?
Thank you. No, I don't live in Maria Miller's constituency, as you well know. So,
on the basis of that, Chair, can I have a point of order? Can you clarify that we are in fact legitimate to proceed this evening with this meeting?
Wait a minute, I'll read what I'm about to read, which tells you that yes, we are legitimate.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
Because thankfully we don't have any councillors who are standing as parliamentary candidates this time, so that's not a problem for us. And the legal advice I've had is that what we must do is avoid any publicity which is designed to influence support to any particular party, and I think that includes any particular candidate. So please, we can debate, give us your views, say what you want, but do not say these are the views of any particular party or these are the views of any particular candidate. Because if we stray into that, I shall have to stop the meeting and move on to the next item or stop the meeting altogether. Okay, thank you. Right. Are there any nominations for the appointment of Vice Chair, which has to come from that side of the room? No? Okay. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Urgent matters, not we have to make an appointment to the tree panel, but we'll keep that to the end. Minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March. Everybody content that I will sign them as correct when we get to the end of the meeting? Right. Item 6, motion referred from Council. Oh, sorry, substitutions. I have gone past. Apologies for absence and substitutions. We have apologies from Councillor Tony Jones, who's been replaced by Councillor Jack Cousins, and Councillor Colin Reagan, who's been replaced by Councillor Paul Harvey. So, welcome, gentlemen. Right, motions referred from Council. We have a public speaker, Mr. David Partridge. If he's here, could you come down to the front, please? And if you press the big button so that your microphone lights up, there's a... Excellent. Now, you will get 2 minutes, but it would be very helpful, we know you're called David Partridge, if you could start by saying who you represent, and I won't start your 2 minutes until you've given us that information, because that would just be very helpful to us.
Okay. Right, so I'm here tonight, I must say, not in any official capacity of Basingstoke Town Football Club, but to represent the rather frustrated fans at the moment of the club. Okay, briefly then, the history. To briefly summarise, the fight for this club has been a long one. Mr. Razak has consistently refused to properly invest either on or off the field, and despite never having wanted to put any of his own money into the club, he has blocked every opportunity for community involvement or outside investment. And so the club has lurched from one crisis to the next, one set of directors and volunteers to another, until finally we are where we are. Mr. Razak owns our club, our stadium, and the land on which it stands, so we think. And despite turning up at the fans forum on the 23rd of May, he refuses to explain how this has come about or to answer a single one of our questions. The loans, the amounts needed for the sale, the Lord Cameron's covenant, the golden share, even the name of his business partner. The future. It was abundantly clear to all those in attendance that the future lies in a new setup, a real community club, owned by and run for the community, with no involvement from Mr. Razak. He has stated his desire to leave, and we agree with this. The forum was also attended by James Matthew from Supporters Direct. In the limited time available, he was able to give us an outline of what the community club setup would entail, and we were informed that another meeting with him would be set up, hopefully in June, to take this model forward. And this is where we as supporters ask BDBC for help to work with this community club. The ground. There are already several models of community owned clubs running services on behalf of their councils. Dartford is a very good example. And it is worth noting that a community-owned club, as opposed to a private limited company, would be able to apply for development and community grants to carry out much of the needed recovery of the club. But the most important thing we need is to have a ground. We as supporters would therefore ask BDBC to look seriously at the proposal raised at the forum that BDBC purchase the 71% of the land now owned by Mr Razak, so taking over the entire Camrose site and lease it back to the new community football club. This would provide a return on the purchase through rental income, added to which the club president, Alan Turvey, has already looked into a proposal to move the stadium around and develop a part of the land for housing, which could give an immediate return on part of the investment, and in the long term, should the club at any time fail, the land returns to BDBC. Yeah, we finally have a major opportunity for change, and we the supporters ask for your help to achieve it.
Thank you. Committee, I'll say to you, thank you for speaking, but you're aware that this is on the agenda because there was a motion for council, and it always appears on our agenda so we can decide what to do with it. At the time we had the full council meeting, it was an urgent matter because the understanding was that the club were going to have to play in Farnborough next year. We've now been told that the club can play at Camrose next season, so the urgency has diminished, and officers are working, and I'm going to check this part in a minute. Officers. Yeah, I think mine stayed on because I didn't switch it off. Officers are working with different, and part of the problem is knowing which bit of the club we're supposed to be working with. So officers are certainly working with the bits of the club we know about to produce a report that we will discuss in detail at our July meeting. That's in our programme. But I'm just trying to, I can't see where the relevant officer, oh, he's two along from me. This is the gentleman who's produced it two along from me, who's coordinating the production of the report for our July meeting. And we've got your contact details, presumably, as you've arranged to come tonight, and you're happy for us to contact you to follow up what you've said and make sure that is reflected in the report we will be discussing in July. Okay? One of the councillors wants to say something, and then I'll...
Thank you, Chair. Just as a matter of support in many ways, is it possible to ask a question in regard to the sort of things you think that we should be looking at in that report? I think it would be helpful just to get a general overview of your thoughts that might guide our officers in terms of their thinking, obviously, and the concerns that you have.
Please don't answer that, because we've got a very tight agenda tonight, Paul, and we've heard what was said. We will liaise with you, so we can do it offline and make sure it is in the report for July.
One other thing the council should know.
Very quickly.
That three of the directors of the club, it has been announced today, have resigned, and those three people form part of the IMG. So we just no longer know who or if there is any IMG left. So that is a great concern. And also, to take up your point about, we were told last week that the club could have to leave the ground at any time. The fact of Farnborough is off, but it could be anywhere else. The club may only have 1 game, 2 games, 2 weeks. Nobody knows. So it is still a very urgent thing.
Thank you. I'm aware of that. And can I just check, is Alan Turvey still there? He's not,
he is.
Thank
yeah.
you. He's my contact, so that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, is that okay? We will discuss this in detail in July with a detailed office report. And I want to say on the record, the officers are also looking at the future for the women's football team, which is also important. All the publicity has been about the men's team, but the future of the women's team is also important. So we will be covering that in July. Councillor Harvey.
Just quickly, if that is the case, Chair, and you're going to discuss it in July, the period intervening between now and then, where matters to move on quickly, where things to change dramatically, as has just been said, for example, the club not being able to actually play at the ground, can members be kept informed of what officers know, and can we at least have that information shared such that it's going to take, 6 or 7 weeks before you get to your next meeting? Things could happen in those 6 or 7 weeks, quite important for the future of the club.
Okay, officers will note that if there's any significant developments, please share it with at least the members of this committee. Thank you. Right, I think that brings us on to the cultural strategy. We have 4 substantive items tonight, 4 different portfolio holders to talk to us. So we will start with Councillor Terry Reid, and the council's cultural strategy. Thank you. Too excited. We have a visiting speaker, visiting councillor. Did you want to speak before the portfolio holder or after? I'll speak before. Okay. So, Councillor Nigel Pearce, and if I press the right button, you'll have 4 minutes.
Thank you. I don't think I'll need 4 minutes. Firstly, I'd like to commend the report. I think it's a really good document overall. And we also need to look at what we have now, which couldn't take place if funding gets reduced. Most of what I'm going to say relates to funding in one form or another. For example, the Fluid Motion Theatre Company, you use the performing arts to build confidence in those who are scared or, for example, have special educational needs. And this continues to be a core part of their work. And in fact, you can see them at work at the All in the Mind Festival on the 24th of June, just over here at the Orchard. Their theatricals project, which brings together adults and young people with disabilities in Basingstoke, performed Robin Hood the pantomime on Tuesday the 13th of December to a packed crowd at the Vine. The performance took place and there was a mixture of theatre, music and dance. Another organisation that we hear about, but doesn't seem to be grounded anywhere in terms of a website, is Carla the Arts. And I've been to a couple of their performances and their dance. And what they do is amazing, and they could not survive without funding, whether it's from us or others. Anvil Arts, I cannot stress strongly enough that the Anvil itself is probably one of the best, if not the best, concert hall in Europe. I had a conversation at a concert there with the director of the Philharmonia, and he told me, in their view, it was pretty much the best in Europe. We're sitting on an amazing piece of engineering. There's a lot about Proteus Theatre in the report. The reason there's a lot about Proteus Theatre is because they do a lot of things with fairly limited resources. And we know that this council has given them some guarantees on funding, and we also have guarantees for Anvil Arts, but it is still on a reducing basis, and I think that's the thing that's getting to me, the reducing basis. We've got a number of good performance areas in the town. We've got the Haymarket, we've got the Anvil, we have Proteus, we have the Walled Garden, and in fact there's a performing area I think you'll all know outside the pub as you go out from the car park in Festival Place. We are a town that's beginning to get a reputation of being a cultural centre, and it would be great, since we are beautiful Basingstoke, we are at the centre of the south, and at the centre should be more art strategy, more, well, I'll just leave it at that. Look at this, 70 languages spoken in this town. There have been 400 homes now occupied by the Nepalese community. There's a growing Philippine community. We have such a diversity and people available to get involved in arts matters that we just can't pass this by. We need to commit to longer term funding in order that theatres and companies can have proper planning. You've only got to look at the Central Studio now, as they do not have a resident manager, and it is like a ghost ship. Programs take years to formulate, and they need the right people in place to do it, and Central Studio no longer has that. We had a group called Motion House, who are an amazing physical theatre group, come to the festival a couple of years ago. It can only come with the support of the council and the level of funding, because we continue to provide a brilliant service with everything that's involved in the festival, including the live bits, which are all free. So please, I commend the report. We are trying to improve residents' quality of life. The arts have a huge impact on that, and I would like to see this report put into action as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. It was slightly over the 4 minutes, but that's
Yeah,
not.
but it was
That's
worth
good.
it,
It was
wasn't
worth. It was worth
It was
listening
worth
to.
it,
Thank
yeah.
you. Right. We took the words out of my mouth. We will now let Councillor Reid introduce, and if you want to say anything in response to what Councillor Pearce has said, I'm sure you'll do that.
Yes?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. And first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Pearce for his words on the cultural strategy. Very, very happy that he's endorsed it. And I'd like to agree with his reiteration of the importance of arts funding and the importance of arts to Basingstoke. And that is one of the reasons why there is now 5-year funding for strategic partners. We all know how vital that is. We know that they need to be able to plan ahead. So I completely agree with you, and thank you for your comments. I will try to be brief just to introduce this strategy. Members will obviously have seen the report and the attached documents. Ross will give a presentation shortly, but the vision for the arts in Basingstoke is encapsulated in there. A vision of Basingstoke and Dean positively known for arts and culture, a place where arts, heritage and culture are an integral part of Basingstoke and Dean's identity and reputation, positioning the borough as an attractive place to live, learn, work and visit. And that is certainly something that we need to aim for continually. The strategy has been developed thus far with major partners within the borough, and Ross, since he's been arts officer, has been engaging widely with partners throughout the borough to talk to them and to get their input onto this. The benefit of an adopted strategy, one of the first benefits that we'll gain from this, is a better relationship with key funders, such as the Arts Council. One of the things they look for is a strategy that's embedded in a council, district or borough or county council's funding. And this will help us to do that. It will help us to have those conversations with Arts Council. They've already been in to see us and they're very interested in what we're doing, and having this strategy adopted was one of their key points because that helps to guide them. So there's an action plan at the back, and I think Ross will say a little bit more about that when he comes on. But the strategy certainly sets out clearly the benefits to residents of a thriving cultural offer, which I would argue that's certainly what we have, and also the economic benefits for Basingstoke and Dean, and there are examples and case studies within that to help with that. We know there are demonstrable benefits from the arts and from participation in the arts in terms of improving health and well-being, quality of life, education outcomes, inward investment, and driving regeneration. We can be proud, I think, of the investment that we have in the arts and the outcomes this should bring, but this needs to continue. Basingstoke and Dean has already an excellent cultural offer, as we know, and as Councillor Pearce has already reminded us. And in fact, when he mentioned the anvil, I'd like to read out this quote, which was very recently in the Times. If you compiled a league table of the top 20 orchestral venues in Britain, let alone Europe, London wouldn't feature. Yes, the Royal Festival Hall, the Barbican and the Royal Albert Hall are repositories of wonderful memories, but acoustically they are third-rate. A city with several world-class orchestras needs a hall at least as good as Gateshead's or Basingstoke. So Basingstoke's concert hall is considered world-class. We have award-winning theatre here from Proteus and other providers. We have a major cultural provider in Hampshire Cultural Trust. We have a thriving group of new and relatively new younger theatre companies, and again, Nigel's mentioned Fluid Motion, for example. There's an ever-growing group of visual artists in Basingstoke, some of whom are based out of Proteus Creation Space. These visual artists include names such as Kev Munday, who was recently mentioned by the Telegraph as one of the top 5 British artists to invest in. Basingstoke Festival is growing and diversifying each year, and I think Ross has the figures for the offer this year and the number of events that we have, which he might reference later. And we're finally reclaiming Jane Austen back for the borough at long last as well. So we have a series of events and installations over the summer. We have the Jane Austen book benches. Already there's a taster of that in Festival Place at the moment, where the schools have worked on designs. And we have the world's first sculpture of Jane Austen to be unveiled in July at the top of town. So claiming her back. And this has attracted national and international publicity, including articles in the New York Times. And there's a very wide and diverse Jane Austen international fandom, which is also hooked into this, and will hopefully generate visits and therefore improvements to the economy in Basingstoke as well. So our role now, I believe, is to encourage and support and further enable more growth in the cultural sector. We really want to put Basingstoke on the map. We want to attract further external funding and inward investment and continue to drive great outcomes for residents through the arts and also drive regeneration as well. Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Just sharing the microphone here. Okay, so tonight we basically are looking for committee to comment on the 10-year vision and the associated action plan. And that's our general direction for arts and culture. We've had a number of stakeholders engaged in this. All the culturally funded organisations have had a chance to comment. And there's been already some comments about referencing dance that have come up this week from Carla the Arts. Okay, so Councillor Reid's already talked about our vision, and this vision was discussed with everyone. But what does it mean? Well, these are our key areas of focus. We're creating a positive reputation for Basingstoke and Deane and really working with our place-shaping goals. The Officer Sarah Still's been working on a new campaign to really promote a positive image of Basingstoke. So we've also had a number of wellbeing projects which are delivered by our cultural organisations. And many of those are highlighted in the case studies in the report. In terms of the creative economy, we have a 5% creative economy that is creative industries locally in Basingstoke. This is up from a national average. But we also need to help revitalise our top of town, and in particular we need to update our creative facilities. Our cultural facilities need to be ready for future generations, and in particular, they need to be ready for digital arts, which is a growing industry locally. We have a number of digital artists relocating to Basingstoke. We know that educational attainment can be improved through use of the arts, and this is highlighted in our report. So if we're improving residents' quality of life, what is it? Well, it's definitely about something to do, things to see. It's about provision. And if we're going to increase our population in Basingstoke, then we need excellent cultural facilities. It's also about putting us on the map. And we can be known, as Councillor Reid's already highlighted, for arts and culture in Basingstoke. So in terms of updating those facilities, these buildings are important as spaces for extracurricular activity. They're important because they drive our economy, people spend money. They're also important because they're part of our historic fabric. Councillor Pearce mentioned the creative diversity and the use of skilled local artists. I mentioned already that we have people relocating to Basingstoke to make work, but we've also got to work with people locally and provide platforms for people to be able to develop in arts and culture and have careers in the industry. And Basingstoke Live is a great platform for that. So the action plan has 12 points on it, and it will be reviewed annually. We will bring it to committee for review, and that's very much the strategic service plan for the arts and events team. It's very much focused on finding external funding. So it's important that we build relationships with people like the Arts Council and the Heritage Lottery Fund to look at other ways of funding and enhancing our work. It's also about building relationships with businesses and trusts and foundations. And it's about really protecting what we've already got. So it's about looking at the Basingstoke Festival, which this year has 212 events, and the Jane Austen Festival this year has 95 different events, but also building on these very unique things that we do differently. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We will do it the traditional way. We'll have questions to the officer and the portfolio if you wish, and then we'll have discussion. So any questions? Right, Councillor Garden.
My question's on the action plan, which has, as you say, 12 very good items to carry forward. But one thing that's missing there seems to be work with schools and colleges to actually encourage the children and the youngsters to get involved in the arts and to appreciate the arts. I know the schools are doing something, but are we doing enough to help them?
Sure, yeah. So the three main cultural organisations we fund, Hampshire Cultural Trust, Proteus Theatre Company and Anvil Arts, all have creative learning programmes which are designed to work alongside the curriculum, the current curriculum. Schools' engagement is particularly tricky at the moment. It is quite hard to engage young people and to engage teachers, but you know, it's very important that we still have these creative learning opportunities, and the extracurricular side of things is really important as well. So we have a number of organisations running things like youth theatre and dance schools. There's over 14 dance schools in the borough, and they all form an important part of our cultural strategy and our delivery in terms of participatory arts going forward.
Supplementary?
This is very good in terms of participation, but certainly it isn't just about participation, it's appreciation. Those people only want to stand and stare, but appreciate what they can see and enjoy. So I think something still needs to be done to make sure that the children get that experience.
So all those funded organisations offer reduced ticket subsidies for young people for various events. And it's all, and the Anvil Arts are still running a matinee programme at the Haymarket, which schools are engaging in. So it's not just about school children leaving schools and going and seeing productions in buildings. It's also about taking productions in and projects into schools for people to see. So Proteus Theatre Company have a touring programme that includes schools touring. So young people are getting a chance to watch theatre, you know, from early years up. Both inside schools, in their local communities, in the village halls, in the community centres, as well as having that opportunity, obviously, to come into town and see things at an affordable price.
Okay, still have questions? Councillor Cousins, you were the next one, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Reid and Ross, for the report. Very good. I have a question in regards to page 24, please. Second paragraph, it says, as Basingview and the Leisure Park were also revitalised during this time, and it continues. So just want to check, is the cultural team linked into the Leisure Park strategy?
We haven't actually started those discussions yet, but we definitely will. And I noticed that certainly in the plans for the leisure park, there's that big outdoor performance space. So certainly, as times develop, we'll certainly have those discussions, definitely. And Basing View as well, in terms of some of the expanse and engaging occupiers, we certainly have started those discussions with Kate Dean.
Okay, no supplementary. Right, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say, first of all, it's great, and I appreciate all that Councillor Reid has been doing on this, and also Councillor Pearce's comments, because I know he's passionate about the theatre and the arts, and we can draw a lot from his experience too. Just point 2 on the Cultural Strategy Action Plan. I do feel very frustrated because the Anvil isn't new anymore. We've had the Anvil for many years, and we know it's a good concert hall. We know it's brilliant. And I just feel frustrated that everybody else doesn't seem to know this yet. I think, you know, people should be travelling from London to Basingstoke, not from Basingstoke to London, to get a good theatre experience. And we do get great diversity there as well. I've been to 2 operas this year, and they were brilliant, but it was half full and half empty, I should say. And that's, I know we can fill it with alternative comedians, and that's good, but it's almost like we've got this sort of great banquet in front of us of all these wonderful things, and we're kind of really good at eating the ham sandwiches, but there's so much more. And I was sitting next to a man who said, at La Bohème, who said, I've come from Petersfield to see this, and I always come because it's brilliant. This is such a good venue. Why doesn't everybody come to it? So my question really is, what ideas have you got for marketing it better, for getting us really recognised as a place which has one of the best theatres, one of the best concert halls in the country, where it's really worth travelling to, and where you can go to an opera that you can afford and not have to mortgage your house to go to Covent Garden?
I've spent 10 years working in the arts where it's really clear people don't value what's on their own doorstep. And certainly Proteus Theatre Company are valued hugely when they tour nationally, and sometimes their ticket prices are, 5 times the rate that you would pay in a village hall rurally in Basingstoke. It's really important that we keep up the profile of our arts in Basingstoke, and that we invest in PR opportunities, and certainly the investment in Jane Austen, Hampshire Cultural Trust have said, has a value of up to £500,000 in terms of tourism. So, it is about that promotion, and it is about that wider recognition of valuing what we've got on our doorstep. I'm not sure how many residents know that we have one of the best concert halls in Europe, and that promotion is key, and it's certainly something that our cultural providers are working really hard on doing. And going forward, I think it's something that we've got to really keep hammering home. There's only so many times that cultural providers can do that. It needs other people to do that. It needs ward councillors to do that. But just going back to your point about the half-full houses, I think it's really important that we engage the next generation, and I think music is key to that. It's something that we really need to focus on, particularly when we have the facilities. But unfortunately, classical audiences are diminishing. The next generation of classical audiences aren't necessarily coming through at the moment, but it's certainly something we're aware of and working on.
But if I can just add to Ross's comments, I think it is also about raising the profile of the arts in Basingstoke generally, which is certainly something that we're very keen to do and are actively engaged in doing. We're in a much better position now than we have been in the past. We now have a dedicated arts team, which we didn't have until recently, and we have the arts strategy that we're working on, and as Ross said, we also have things like the Jane Austen projects, which are just generally helping to raise our profile and get us taken a little bit more seriously. So that's a kind of general theme that we're working to in terms of look at us, look at Basingstoke. We actually have an amazing cultural offer, and obviously the Anvil is one of the real jewels in that crown in terms of the programming, the acoustics, the fact that it is a world-class concert hall, and we just need to make sure that we keep banging that drum, and we also need to make sure that we continue to fund them.
Thank you.
Could
Did you
I
have a
just-
supplementary? Yeah.
If I may, yes. I mean, I agree with you. We need to bang the drum. We need to bang it in the right places, obviously. If we don't even know Basingstoke, what a magnificent place we've got, then nobody else is going to know. But I think you're right. I think classical music is diminishing. I mean, even in the last generation, interest in it. But I wonder if that's because we're not directing it in the right place. If you watch Britain's Got Talent, somebody sings a beautiful aria and everyone's in tears, including Simon Cowell, and thinks it's wonderful. You put a whole opera on and nobody wants all that recitative in the middle, which is really boring. And I wonder if we can do something a bit innovative. This isn't really a question. Well, it is. I'm saying, would you agree? You know, that maybe we've got the National Opera Studio in London, which has the cream of young opera singers who are just learning their craft. And they need a showcase. They need a really good theatre to go and sing their favourite arias. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have that in Basingstoke and say, come along, you can hear all those lovely things you hear on Britain's Got Talent, and they're all concentrated with beautiful voices in one place and at one time. It's just an idea, but if we can think outside the box a bit, that would be a good idea. Thank you.
As the councillor just about managed to make it a question, would you like to answer?
Yes, please. I'd just point to one example, which was the Mahogany Opera last year for young people in the Haymarket. And those projects really do happen, and the investment from Basingstoke and Dean in the Anvil Arts is spent on those educational projects. That creative learning programme has something like 12 different programmes running throughout the year, and working predominantly with young people. Again, I think we need to make members maybe aware of these projects. Certainly that Saturday afternoon in the Haymarket was pretty full, and that was young people at the age of 5 engaging in new opera.
Thank you. We're still on questions. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I had 3 questions actually on page 29, the action plan. So the first one was about the 5-year business plan for the festival and Basingstoke Live. So a lot has been said about Basingstoke Festival, but not a lot has been said about Basingstoke Live. But I'd like to get a little bit more detail as to what is actually the vision for Basingstoke Live. Is Basingstoke Live likely to change in the near future? Are we likely to be charging admission? Are we looking to grow it as a festival? Are we looking to hand over the running of that to another organisation? I'd be very interested to hear what proposals are going on there. There's inherent risks in putting on music festivals. We get a large number of people to Basingstoke Live at the moment because it's free, but there's only so much you can do putting on a festival where you're not charging for it. There are other festivals, sort of mid-range festivals nearby, things like Guildfest. And then obviously there's Reading up the road, but we're never going to put on a festival that's going to be anything like Reading Festival. That's been around for donkey's years, and it's got proper companies that work year round on that. But I'd like to get a little bit more information as to what is the vision for Basingstoke Live, and have we thought about teaming up with other organisations running other festivals elsewhere in the country to take it to the next level? So that's question 1.
Yeah, I'm happy to let you do your 3 questions, but should we do, probably easier to do answers one at a time? Is that
if you
yeah.
want, yes.
As you've said you're doing 3, I will let you do 3, but we'll do the answers one at a time. It's probably easiest.
Right.
So Basingstoke Live is very unique as an event, and I think, you know, this is the brand new team this year. We've come in very much independently, but we are looking to sustain it. You know, 22,000 people we think attended last year. We've had to implement some changes this year, some of which haven't been particularly popular. It's still a free event, but we've had to introduce the ticket system, and that's partly so we know exactly how many people are attending, but also where they're coming from. Are they coming from Basingstoke, or are they coming from outside of the borough? It's also helped address some safety concerns about planning for the day, knowing what numbers we're up against, and also knowing where how we might deal with egress from the event, in particularly working in partnership with the police and the PCSOs. So it's our plan this year is to go through 1 year, because this new team needs to go through this year, and then start putting together a business plan that sustains Basingstoke Live, or looks to sustain Basingstoke Live. Now, there's a number of ways we could do that. We could do that through, as you say, charging entry. I think that possibly at this stage is not viable, because it totally changes the feel of the event. But you know, we need to look at other ways we could potentially bring in income. Now, that could be through community project funding. It could be through the Arts Council supporting some of the music that happens at that event. It could be through improving the stalls offer, because at the moment the sort of standard fish and chips van isn't necessarily paying huge amounts to be there. So can we up the quality and create a bit more of a festival feel and a buzz to the event, but still have a safe, fun event? Can we look at trialling other paid events around Basingstoke Live that use the infrastructure, that share the infrastructure? The infrastructure goes in on a Tuesday. It starts to be set up ready for the weekend. So this year we're trialling the Jane Austen film screening on the Friday night before the event. Can we introduce the sale of lanyards to create some income? Can we look to get some business sponsorship as well for it? And that's what that business plan is about. It's about going, how can we sustain this going forward without changing the uniqueness of Basingstoke Live and that sense of community and that passion. I've sat in some wonderful Basingstoke Live forum meetings this year, and you know, there's 10 years of passion there. And it's for me about it coming back to the music and the art, and it not necessarily being an opportunity just to get drunk in the park.
Thank you. Second question.
Okay, our second question's on point H. We're talking about support the growth of rural arts in the borough and supporting projects towards that are underrepresented by culture. So a lot of what is expressed in the strategy, we talk about the Anvil, we talk about Basingstoke Live. These are all things that are very much focused on the town centre. Where there is scope for growth, and where we do have people that are struggling and need help, is in some of the outlying areas of Basingstoke. So to cite three examples, Popley, Winklebury and Brighton Hill. So Popley has Popley Festival. It's a very big successful event. It can have up to 10,000 people in a single day, and that's entirely run by the community. It used to be run by the school. It's now run by a festival committee and has input from other people. Winklebury did have a carnival. That was massive contribution was made from that from the late ex-councillor Lee Jeff. She did have some support within the community, but it was mainly through her hard work that was kept going over a number of years. That has since fallen by the wayside, and we're looking to bring back the carnival, the Winklebury Gala, this year. But I think there needs to be some more support from the council in terms of some of these community initiatives. I mean, the third example is Brighton Hill. So Brighton Hill has got a community fun day coming up that's mainly being organised by one of the churches, but it's a massive undertaking to grow something like the Brighton Hill Community Fun Day into something like the Popley Festival. And at the moment we're relying entirely on volunteers to do this. So what I'd like to see reflected in the strategy is something that says where we have people willing to give things a go, that we can get a bit more support from the council on that. And I know from past experience with some of the other initiatives that, you know, from time to time when I was on the council previously, I get approached by people saying things like, why don't you start the Basingstoke Carnival again? Or I want to do this particular festival supporting troops, whatever. And some of the things that were arranged against these people, hoops that they had to jump through, health and safety, police, were quite considerable. Risks that they had to do, liability insurance. The odds are really stacked against them. And yeah, it seems to me we've got this expertise in the borough, and we don't seem to give sufficient help to some of these people to make sure that some of these events that are well supported in their own communities are able to sustain themselves.
I think that was a question.
So we have a dedicated events officer in the new arts and events team, and she is supporting an array of events where she can. I think it's probably worth saying that there's over probably in the region of 50 events in the summer alone. And a number of different events that range from school feints to community association events, from the Kemp Shot Festival to Winkelby Gala, as you say, Old Basing Carnival. And there's something really going on in every ward. It's just, you know, prioritising where the demands and the needs are. And we do try and make it as easy as possible. So if someone is struggling with, for example, public liability insurance, risk assessments, then Jade in our team offers a meeting to sort of go through that and to help and assist. The one recently I would use was the Rotary event at Down Grange, which was incredibly successful and had as many people as the Kite Festival, which is this weekend. So yeah, the support is there. So if you know of anyone that is looking for some extra support, then let us know, and we'll certainly assist where we can.
Okay, third question. Fairly briefly, I think, please.
Okay, well, I also heard that the, as an aside, that the Kemp Shot Festival had been cancelled this year. My understanding was that was because some parents had decided that it would be better to have it in half term, and the stall holders that they usually had booked other events, but that's by the by. Point L in the action plan: work with developers to ensure innovative schemes, etc., etc., etc. What about communities and local councillors in that? And what about our existing communities? I'll give you 3 examples of that. Brighton Hill, all the roads in Brighton Hill are named after composers. Yet, if you ask your average resident who that composer was and to cite any music that they've composed, they probably wouldn't know. So, you know, I think that's something we need to address in the borough, so that people actually know a bit more about, you know, the people that are named after in their road. There's an anecdotal example going back to when Brighton Hill was built. Ex-councillor Chris Connor was on the council then. I think he might even have been mayor at that time. And at that time, councillors were given a say in the naming of the roads. And one of the councillors that was on this subcommittee with him, and I think he was a bit of a right-wing persuasion, had a bee in his bonnet about foreign-sounding composer names, and he didn't want foreign-sounding composer names being used in Brighton Hill. So he said, and this example, who is this Arne? You know, what's he? He sounds foreign. Now, Arne was the composer who wrote Rule Britannia, but this councillor is obviously ignorant of that fact at the time. So if we have councillors who don't even know who our composers are, you know, what hope for our normal residents? So what I'd really like to see is some kind of cultural initiative where we have composers, you know, obviously we've got well-known ones like Beethoven, and then we've got ones like Verdi that some people know about, and then we've got others that people may know less about, how we could explore, you know, having some pieces of music or something that you could play on iPhones or something in close proximity to a beacon or whatever on the road sign, or some kind of cultural trail or something like that. Black Dam, artists, you know, could we have some copies of their works that are displayed in and around the roads. Popley and Southam, parts of Popley and Southam are named after authors. People like obviously William Shakespeare or Robert Burns or some of these other people, Kipling, Tennyson. I would very much like to see some kind of initiative that goes in at grassroots level and engages with local residents. Says this is the person whose road was named after. What do you know about him, and did you know about these things?
Point noted, and I think certainly for future festivals that sounds like a lovely project. I think in terms of road names, certainly in terms of working with developers, there's a number of outstanding Section 106 projects, and they all have to have a community project as part of them. So there's an opportunity there, definitely.
Okay, fine. We're still on questions, and I have quite a long list of people. I've just seen 2 more. So just keep an eye on the time, guys, because we've got 3 more substantive items after this one. So keep the questions as tight as you can, because there may be some discussion when we finish questions. It's back to you, Councillor Cousins. Okay, in that it's Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick follow-up, really, on Councillor Taylor's remarks. Because clearly when you're getting the anvil half empty and so on, it's a question of marketing. And I just wondered, I mean, when I've been there, and often I am persuaded by Classic FM, the such and such Philharmonia playing in the anvil, I mean, that to me is a strong marketing tool. I just wondered what the evidence is that those that are advertised on Classic FM do in fact increase the audience numbers. That would be one question. And if I may just quickly, I would just like a comment on your action plan J, which is this research evaluation. I just wondered what was in mind with that. Thank you.
That's very much about audience development for this year, and it's very much looking at what audiences are for things. There's a number of art forms that are becoming quite popular locally, in particular circus and puppetry, and it's more about working out what our audiences are for our work. Going back to Councillor Taylor's comment about the anvil, what sort of percentage we're playing to in our cultural venues, but also just working out the desire for culture locally, and how we really make sure that we're providing for the residents that want it, and what that is. So it's a research year looking at a whole, if you like, from audiences to art forms, what's missing, what do we need more of, and where. And just going back to the previous comment on the Rural Fund, that was set up to look at some of those wards that have a lower percentage engagement in culture. So it's really working out where, not everyone's coming into the town centre, and making sure that there's something in every ward going forward.
Did you, Classic FM?
I didn't quite understand the Classic FM point.
Could you repeat that question then, please?
Sorry, Classic FM. I don't know whether you listen to it. I do. And from time to time you hear concerts advertised in the Anvil at Basingstoke. That clearly is talking to the whole country. I am assuming, and I just was asking for confirmation, whether it is true that when such marketing is used, or when the Classic FM announce a concert in Basingstoke, does that really increase the audiences? I assume it does. And at that point, talking to you about research, then the question of where's that audience coming from? How far are they coming, to come to Basingstoke?
I'm not sure. I can certainly find that out. But in terms of the mosaic data that the Anvil has, they do have a really wide reach of people travelling, certainly up from London, from as far as Newcastle, for concerts. So it's certainly their audience isn't just a Hampshire-wide, a local audience. People are travelling quite far to come to concerts in Basingstoke, but I can certainly find out about Classic FM and whether that has an impact.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. Just really, first of all, I'd like to say, I really think this is great to have the culture strategy, and it really follows on from the work that we perhaps did when we were looking at outsourcing some of the art facilities within the borough a couple of years back. And we brought lots of all the local groups into play to come along and look and see what they wanted ideally for the outcome of their particular projects, whether that's Proteus, the Haymarket, the Anvil, and smaller community groups as well. And I thought that was excellent work. And this sort of follows on. And all I guess I'd like to say is, as long as we keep on continuing to involve all those groups, I think we'll have a strong culture strategy, and it will be great, like we have Basingstoke Live, the festival. These are great projects, and they're still growing, and I think that's the amazing thing. I did want to pick up also on Councillor Taylor's points as well, because I look back now, and here I am in my silver years, and I was a person who liked to go to the theatre when I was in my younger years, in my 20s, even at the Haymarket. And as I still continue to go, unfortunately, everybody seems to have grown at the same age as me now, and those young people aren't there. But actually, I think it's a national problem. I also use London theatres in London, and I actually see the same there, where there's perhaps a better mix of age groups, but the younger people aren't there. And it's about how do we capture the young people of this town, of this borough, to start going to the Haymarket, because long term, it looks like it wouldn't be viable to continue just putting on plays for this. Eventually I'll be gone, and so my age group is and all that. So what comes along next is there's nobody there to go and see these plays and look at these historic plays that we so love. So I'm really keen, and I don't know the answer to that, and perhaps I guess if it's a national problem as well, you probably don't either, but I don't want to lose sight of that. That's the point I want to make there. Yeah.
It's certainly something that's on our radar, and certainly Christine Bradwell at Anvil Arts is continually saying there is a lack of product out there, a lack of touring product that is suitable for the Haymarket space in terms of its size and dimensions, and it's certainly something that we're continually looking at to monitor the trends, to see what there is available really out there for a diverse audience, and I think going forward, if we do look to update some of our cultural facilities, then actually we need to look at the Fly Tower at the Anvil, at the Haymarket, and we do also need to look at the stage. It's very inaccessible at the moment, so we need to look at how we can create a better environment, a more flexible environment for more touring productions, a bigger breadth, more diverse productions, and enhance the programme substantially.
Very quickly, yes.
Just a quick, there's not a supplementary. But the other thing I wanted to come back to is the Jane Austen, which you made great play of tonight, and saying how we're taking ownership of that. Going through the mails on a regular basis, most weeks, I haven't for the last two, through reasons to myself. But opposite Laura Ashley is a shop that had a lot of Jane Austen there. But I didn't quite get it, because suddenly things were coming up, and then it was empty again. And you made much play about the international thing, but I don't think that was particularly well done. Because I didn't get it, and if I didn't get it, well, I'm not saying I should get it, but how would other people understand what was going on there quite?
Yeah, sure.
That was the very beginning of the book bench project. So the book benches, this has been commissioned by Destination Basingstoke. They are a range of benches that are going to go all around the borough and wider. They've been designed by artists from Basingstoke and beyond to a Jane Austen theme. So what was happening in there was DB had an arrangement with Festival Place that some of the artists were in there decorating the book benches as they went. But that's just a tiny taster. What will happen now, in a couple of weeks' time actually, is the bench project will be launched officially, and the benches will go out all around the town, and there will be an app to go with it, and there'll be walks and all sorts of publicity around that. So that was just a tiny part, and there's much more of that to come. But there are book benches that are in Festival Place all this week that have been designed by local schools as well. So that's definitely worth a look. It's on the upper floor of Festival Place. But these are all just tasters leading to that larger project that will be with us all through the summer.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
Okay, still questions? Councillor Harvey.
Am I?
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Can I just commend the report and say it's incredibly detailed and incredibly full, and thank you. In terms of the question I've got, it relates to 1.2, and it relates to the money involved element here. In the sentence there, the last sentence, it talks about over 5 years we will see funding in the particular year of just over £1 million. Is that £1 million year on year for the next 5 years, or is it changing throughout that budget period?
It is reducing over 5 years. The actual figures, it's a total reduction of 250k. And I'm just going to check with another officer and whether that's one organisation or whether that's more than one. So that's all of our organisations. So that's Anvil Arts, Hampshire Cultural Trust and Proteus Theatre Company on that.
Could I ask, if that's the case, is it possible to have a breakdown? Is it possible to have the year-on-year figures? Because then that would give us the whole picture of actually what's being asked to comment on. And I commend the report, no issue with the report, but it would have helped if it was in here a little bit just to give us that flavour, I think. Totally get where you're coming from in terms of what you're suggesting, Ross, in terms of the detail of this. And, you know, I can see the effort, the considerable effort and your expertise that's got into this with other members of the team. Can I just ask, you reflect on the Anvil and the big ticket items, if you like, for example, the Haymarket. One of the issues, I think, is how we mean and what we define as being accessibility. And I'm really interested in trying to understand how we might market in the context of wanting people to come from Newcastle or wanting people to come from Petersfield to access something that they can afford and that they can afford to travel to access in the first place as well, amongst also communities and how they engage with those buildings when actually what's put on in those buildings may well be unaffordable to them completely. And it's also that notion of my other colleagues have raised, the community aspects. Maybe it's not so much what goes on in the Anvil, but what the Anvil itself can do in those communities for arts projects, for example, the schools, and you've already referred to that, and then building that relationship that isn't just about the physical building, as brilliant as it might be. It's more than just that, isn't it?
So the Creative Learning Programme, I keep coming back to it, but the Anvil's Creative Learning Programme is happening out of the Anvil. The majority of that happens in schools, in the communities. It's about taking world music to children with autism at Dove House School. That's just one of their many projects that they're supporting. Fluid Motion Theatre Company, they've supported this year with the All in the Mind Festival. The other example I would use is Proteus's £20 family pledge for village halls. The Under 5 show at the Creation Space is £5 a ticket at an expensive time of year, you know, at Christmas. So it's, yeah, I think it's happening. It's just about making sure communities are aware of it and really promoting that going forward. Yes.
Okay, question-wise, unless Councillor Cousins does want to come back, I've just got Councillor Gardner left on the list.
It's short. Following the comments on the work of the events officer and need to prioritise their time, rather than have 50 meetings for all the individual events going on, do we or should we actually have events here where we bring people in so we can actually have one meeting for 50 people rather than 50 meetings?
Yeah. point noted, and it's certainly something that we're going to look at this year after this summer to work out what support is needed for some of those community organisations. The other thing that we really want to do is an Arts Council funding surgery for local artists so that they can apply, because on the flip side, the Arts Development Office is having a number of phone conversations with local artists who are looking to apply for funding for the first time, and again, rather than do that on a one-on-one basis, we look to do that with a group of artists as a surgery collectively, so it's certainly something that's on the radar.
Okay, so Councillor Cousins, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I actually wanted to ask the portfolio holder and Ross's opinion on something. We have all talked about how we improve and keep our cultural impact improving, and I think that we all agree that part of that is education. If it wasn't for me as a drama student, I wouldn't have been introduced to or read as much Shakespeare or Dickens or Brecht as I would not have done had I not been introduced in that way. But there's been an educational change where the English baccalaureate now takes precedent and arts education is not included in that. And because of the schools and teachers' influences on focusing on the English baccalaureate, it means that GCSE uptake of drama, music, art, design and technology have reduced, and even English literature, which is key to certainly our Jane Austen hopes and pinning and bringing her back, you know, that doesn't help our cause. So I want to get your opinion. Do you think that change in education policy has actually helped or hindered us?
I don't think it's a help, to be perfectly honest. It can't be, can it? I think it's a great shame that we have moved away from supporting the arts in education as much as happened previously. Ross in particular, with drawing up the cultural strategy, has taken quite a lot from the Cultural Learning Alliance, who we've worked with quite closely. And they very clearly set out the benefits of the inclusion of arts in education, the benefits to children, and just the whole point of engaging very early with young people in the arts, as you reference, makes a huge difference. I think it's kind of a lifelong journey then. Once you start at a young age, you've got that engagement with the arts, and that tends to stay with people. So yeah, personally I think it's not helpful. It is what it is. That is the situation. It just means we've got to work all the harder, I think, to engage with young people and schools. And it does make it more difficult, I think, for the cultural organisations to engage with schools as well. There are a number of reasons for that, but one of them, I think, is the fact that there is less in the way of cultural education in schools. So we have to find ways of trying to support and prop up that kind of gap there, and raise people's awareness and get that early engagement, if we can, with young people. So that's why we've got the references there in the report to that.
Thank you. So that's questions done. We're now into discussion. If I could ask you to turn to page 10, committee, where our task is set. The views of the committee are sought on the strategic direction of this strategy and 10-year vision and the associated action plan. Now, I think based on the questions, we are content with the strategic direction of the strategy. No one seems to be questioning that. And the 10-year vision is difficult to do anything other than support. But if anyone has any comments on either of those that they think, very quickly, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciating what's in here, I make a couple of comments around, for example, when we talked about Basingstoke Live, you mentioned the point that it's more than about the money. And that's a very important point. One of the successes of Basingstoke Live is the fact of how it's created an environment of something very special in its own way and in its own place. Now, one of the things going forward is that we hold on to that over the life of the plan. And now you're talking about change. And I think one of the tests of this strategy is going to be whether or not you can hold on to, for example, that very special thing that Basingstoke Live is. And that's just one example of one of the things that is in this strategy. And for us, I think that's probably where the test of this, if you're talking about what a KPI might be associated with this, it's can you hold on to that and change it in the way that is both positive and that we don't lose what is very special about a lot of what's in here. That's just one comment. On the education point, I think it's particularly sad, Chair, to be perfectly honest, and I would like this to be commented and to be recorded. I think, we had a perfect opportunity on Thursday night to actually engage with the County Council on something as important as you've raised it in the report. This is where the Borough Council can actually add value to a debate such as that. And I think that's actually of great credit to this report. It's a shame that we couldn't raise that on Thursday night with our County Council colleagues because a general election candidate thought it was wiser of her interests to call off the meeting. Now, I find that very sad, Chair. That's the only comment I'll make on that tonight.
Yeah, just to say...
That's the only comment
yes,
I'll make on that
that
tonight. But it is
meeting will be
relevant
rearranged.
because this report makes it relevant in the context of the debate we've just had and how pathetic that is. Can I just say, in terms of the cultural issues, it's interesting talking about Classic FM. When you say classic music, the immediate thought that went through my head was it's the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's, but that wasn't what you were meaning. Sorry, it's my age. In terms of saying that, I think the variety that's in here is something that we should actually celebrate, and I would like that to be recorded as a comment. And if we're going to celebrate the diversity and the variety that is in here, then the financial element is really important. And that's why I asked the question that I asked, because a lot of the organisations could not do what they do, could not be as successful as they are, and could not grow in the way perhaps we want them to, if not for this borough putting its money where its mouth is. Now, the flip side to that is Milestones, Basing House, and the Willis, where the County Council have a role. And that's where the question relating to the leisure park is very important. And I'm not happy that you're not involved in those negotiations and discussions now, where a private company is deciding the future of the leisure park that involves Milestones that we're not part of. Now, if that's the case, that is disturbing, and we should actually raise that as an issue, because that directly relates to a very important part, a very important asset that we have in Basingstoke in Milestones that has been very, very successful. And I don't know where it fits in New River Retail's bright ideas for the future of the leisure park. And obviously, our officers are not directly involved in those conversations. They should be. And I don't know why they're not, Chair. And I'd quite like an answer to come back from a senior officer as to why that is the case. And if I'm going to be told it's because the legals are being organised or this, that and the other, well, if they're designing and agreeing the things now, then why are not our officers part of those conversations?
Interesting, we've still got a question we're in debate, but yes, I don't know whether the portfolio holder would like to respond to that, as to whether, whether this is, saying more about to what extent we will be involved when it matters and whether now is when it matters.
Thank you. Yes, officers are definitely involved in those discussions, as are HCT and HCC, and as far as I'm aware, there is a future for Milestones, most definitely, and HCT have big plans, as far as I understand.
Okay, for those listening, HCT, Hampshire Cultural Trust, and HCC we know is the County Council. Right.
Can I just thank the Cabinet member? Because actually we've had nothing on New River Retail and the Leisure Park for over a year, and that's the first statement I've heard publicly from any member of the Cabinet on this subject at all. So thank you, because it's important as members we have a right and should be knowing what's going on, and so thank you for your statement.
Thank you. I'm trying to work out whether there was anything in what you were saying about the strategy that we ought to capture as a, that we could all coalesce around because you weren't proposing any changes, were you? I think we're just saying that we recognise the importance of funding, which we've already discussed, and diversity, and they are reflected in the funding and diversity and retaining the unique value of what we already have. I think those were your 3 points. I'm coming to you. He's typing away, so that's and that we recognise they're in the strategy, but we regard those important things that are guarded as we go forward. Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. There are two very small amendments that I'm suggesting we make. One is on page 14, and it relates to a comment that Councillor McCormack made earlier in relation to paragraph L, that we add as well, so it would now read, work with developers, communities and local councillors.
We're not on the plan yet. We're on the strategy.
Okay, but I think that intent should be recorded. And then on page 17, which is the draft cultural strategy, the third paragraph, I think you meant popular accessible creative events rather than popular accessible events.
Right. Did we catch that? Because sorry, I'd interrupted you in the middle there. Tell us again where that second point is, please.
It's paragraph 3 on page 17, third paragraph. It should be popular accessible rather than popular accessible.
Yes, in the executive summary. I think that must be right. So we will record that in the minutes. That should be right. But the other point we can pick up in the plan, if that's all right. So were everybody okay with my very high-level summary of what we saw as the important bits of the strategy that we want to see, you know, that without changing the wording, we want to see recognised and as it goes forward. So as regards the plan, if I can find where it was, what I was going to say, I think implicit in the questions, as inevitably, there were a number of suggestions. So they weren't implicit, they were generally explicit. And I think it would be difficult to go through, particularly given the time, and capture them all. But I thought they were all very sensible. I didn't think there was anything any of us would want to disagree with on either side of the room. So if we could capture the various suggestions made in questions relating to the plan, we would like to see pursued, because, you know, we can always look back at the webcast. Yes, Kaz?
Sorry, Chair, just one thing that I've sputtered on the plan. Paragraph B, I think it should be the external marketing of Basingstoke and Dean, rather than just Basingstoke as a separate entity. I think, especially as we're looking at including the rural areas, the Dean certainly should be referenced. Are
you any objection if we recommend that? No? Okay, committee, we'll suggest and Dean is added. Otherwise, I think the plan is good, but we've just, you know, we've highlighted areas that we would like officers and the portfolio holder to bear in mind when they're working out the detail of how this goes forward. And I shall rely on the minute taker to find some creative way of recording that. Okay, is that it for that item? Thank you very much. Now, slight changes of portfolio holder and officer and... We'll still have to look at you. Right, okay, we're now on to item 8, flight tipping in Basingstoke and Dean, and Councillor Eaches is going to introduce this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, this is a report on fly tipping. So, as it says in the report, fly tipping is a problem. It's a problem both locally and nationally, and it causes lots of frustration amongst our residents and officers and members alike. So we have a report. You will see in the report that the number of incidents which are being logged has risen from 1,036 in 15-16 to 2,147 in 16-17, so this is over doubled. We do have to be quite careful with just taking that figure at face value, and I am going to hand over to Rhys in a second, who is going to go into a lot more detail about the table that's provided with the figures, but there are some points that I would just like to make. the operations team, I really would like to praise them because they're out on the ground. They work really, really hard, and I've been out with them recently, actually last week, the fly tipping team. They're all very passionate. They make sure every single bit of waste is collected, and you'll probably all agree that if you as a member make a complaint to the operations team about fly tipping, or even a member of the public, that fly tipping is usually collected that day. If it's not, then it will, in my experience, always be collected the next day. And I think we have to bear that in mind, that we do have a very good response. We also have a high number of reports, and again, I think that's really positive, and we shouldn't be pushing residents away from making reports. We want a tidy borough. We've made it a lot easier for residents to report incidents of fly tipping, and we want to continue to encourage that. So again, probably another reason why there's higher instances, because there are a lot more easier ways to report. So whilst the team do a great job of collecting the waste, they spot it, collect it, weigh it. Previously, if it wasn't a large amount, it wasn't always logged, but now due to changes in the way the operations team work and change in management, absolutely everything is being logged, no matter how small, and this correlates, the change in data collection does correlate to the increase in reports of in the incidents of fly tipping. So again, it may not be that fly tipping has increased as much as it looks on the paper. I mean, if you look at the weights of fly tipping, that has gone down year on year, and it's gone down quite considerably. Speaking to the teams, speaking to the management who deal with the fly tipping, there hasn't been any pressure on the teams. They don't feel that the fly tipping's increased massively. They're not asking for more men on the ground. So again, that would correlate to the fact that the way the reporting is being logged in data is a reason for it going up so much. But it is an issue, and we do at this council take fly tipping extremely seriously. It is illegal, and when it happens, it's a blight on the landscape. Just to make clear, and I know there's been some stuff in the press recently, but we do here at Basingstoke and Dean absolutely investigate every incident of fly tipping. The crews are diligent in looking for evidence, but it's not always easy. I know when I was out with them last week, they feel just as passionately about the people that are fly tipped being caught and prosecuted or fined, but it's finding that evidence. It isn't easy, and that's not just a problem in Basingstoke and Dean, that is a problem nationally. And again, I think we will go into a bit more detail about that. We have put the fines up from £200 to £400 because the rules have changed. We've put it up to the maximum we can, but to fine somebody, you do need the same amount of evidence that you would need for a prosecution. But as I say, the teams really are dedicated trying to prosecute for fly tipping, and will do absolutely all they can. In the last 6 months, they have dealt with countless witness statements and in excess of 25 interviews under caution. And they do everything they can, but I'm afraid it's just life that it's so difficult to prosecute. You need to go to court, you need evidence, and the magistrate needs to be sure that the evidence is there. And actually it shows that a lot of people that see fly tipping, it's their neighbour, and when it comes to the crunch, as much as you might not like the fact your neighbour's fly tipped, you've got to live next door to them, and you get to the point and you get cold feet because you don't want to stand up in court next to them and give that evidence. So we're up against all of that, but the teams do all they can, and we absolutely have a zero tolerance against fly tipping. It's just managing to get all the evidence, and we do try that on a regular basis. So that's just some information just pulled out of the report and some examples, but if I can hand over to Rhys to give you some more detail on the numbers.
Thank you. Good evening, members. This paper is presented to update, share and publish the information we have on the incidents of fly tipping around the borough, our response and enforcement to fly tipping, and our future plans for this area of work. Beginning with the figures and reporting, the standard elements of the report is Table 1. That reports the various statistics related to fly tipping in the borough. In row 1, this table presents data on the reports made by the public, which has steadily increased since 2013-14. We're encouraged by this figure, as it is a positive reflection of public engagement on this issue, which is something we've long promoted. It's also easier than ever for the public to report these issues to us, whether that be through the Council's website, mobile apps, email, or more conventional methods of contacting the Council. It's worth highlighting that reports differ to incidents. This is because reports made by the public will contain duplicate reports where one person is reporting the same incident, more than one person is reporting the same incident. Reports of fly tips on private land, and incidents which aren't actually fly tip or perhaps have disappeared by the time we've responded. Incidents are those that we substantiate by officers and crews attending and where the waste is cleared by us. Road 2 shows these incidents of the fly tip waste that we as a council clear up. This is the data that is reported to DEFRA, which they then publish annually. Clearly, the standout figure here is that reported for 16-17 compared to previous years. While this figure appears concerning at face value, we do not believe it represents the true increase that it suggests, and is more a product of better and more robust reporting brought about by managerial changes in the operations team. It's more likely that the figures for the previous years underreported the clearance work that we were doing. Anecdotally, colleagues in the ops team do not report a doubling in their workload in collecting the collections of fly tip waste. And if that were true, if the amount had doubled, then we would have seen an acute pressure on the resources we currently have. Row 3 presents data on the weight of waste of those fly tips we have collected in the same years. This presents an encouraging picture as far as the quantity of waste we are handling is concerned, but clearly contrasts with row 2. This would suggest that the amount of waste we're collecting is decreasing, so casts some doubt on there being a true increase in the number of incidents. Moving on to our response and enforcement. The Council's enforcement response is a collaborative effort between the Environmental Health team, my team, the Operations team and the Community Safety team. Operational details on how this works and how we're organised are included in Appendix 1. We're pleased to have had 9 cases in this last year where we've been able to discharge those offences with the new fixed penalty notices. Prior to these fixed penalty notices, those cases would have ended up as prosecutions. However, the investigative process is the same for both. In the context of total incidents, we know this is a very low number, but for reasons outlined in the report, gaining reliable and compelling evidence, reliable witnesses to gain convictions is extremely difficult. And more often than not, there is not the evidence of any perpetrator nor witness to any particular incidents. In the same period, it's worth highlighting that colleagues in the operations and community safety teams have tackled 79 homeowners with warning notices for waste that they have placed at the rear of their properties in back alleys, for example. And the homeowners then have been challenged and have themselves cleared that waste as opposed to us. As a benchmark, in the context of prosecutions, action across the other boroughs and districts in the county is very low. In 2016-17, we believe there were 2 prosecutions, 1 in 15-16 and 3 in 14-15. And just to reiterate, that's county-wide. We have numerous actions pending currently and are hopeful that some of these will lead to prosecutions this year. Future and recent actions. All local authorities face a significant battle in tackling fly tipping, and this is also true of Basingstoke and Deane. We face further challenges in people's attitude and behaviour towards waste disposal as a result of the changes made and pending at the household waste and recycling centres around the county. Informing and guiding our residents on waste responsibility is a must if we are to have any success in tackling fly tipping. In conjunction with our colleagues in the communications team, we have been developing a communications strategy to support our enforcement work. One of our priorities as part of this will be to make use of targeted messages distributed through social media. One of the biggest challenges we face, and the feedback we often get about where people have found people to dispose of their waste unlawfully, is those offering cash-in-hand services or seeking cheap solutions to waste disposal on Facebook groups that we cannot access and spread educational or informative messages on how they should be doing it. Enforcement has a big part to play in our response, and the recent move to maximise the fixed penalty notice levels reflects this. Any enforcement action will always be reliant on engaged and reliable witnesses and strong evidence, as I alluded to earlier. In the near future, we expect Hampshire County Council to initiate their strategy to deal with fly tipping as a county-wide issue, which we will play our part in and seek to get the benefits from locally. This will involve working with partner agencies on a county-wide basis, and is also something we intend to do with our own local partners, including the police and the housing associations. I'd just like to draw your attention to a couple of points of accuracy in the report. Paragraph 5.5, if I could just draw your attention to that. This should read the proposed changes to the opening hours and the introduction of charges, rather than the recent changes to the opening hours. And also in Appendix 1, where we refer to land where we as a borough council remove the waste, it's not confined solely to Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council owned land, but also land that we have a duty towards in the context of a waste collection authority or as the litter authority. So, i.e. we collect from highway land. We do not collect waste or remove waste that is in private ownership. Thank you. That brings to a close my overview of the report.
Right. Questions? Councillor Gardner.
This report is headed Fly Tipping in Basingstoke and Dean, and a lot of statistics refer to fly tipping on Basingstoke and Dean land rather than the borough as a whole. Do we have statistics for fly tipping on private land? And isn't there a possibility that because we don't collect from private land, a lot of fly tipping isn't reported?
We don't collect the data we don't collect data of fly tipping incidents on private land because the data on those incidents we do collect are incidents that we're removing as a borough council. We do get information from members of the public, landowners, that there are incidents on their own land, and we investigate those. I should make that clear. It's not that we leave people to their own devices, and if it's not council land, it's not our problem. We very much support private landowners. If there is waste on their land and there's indication that there's or some evidence that of who the perpetrator will be or might have been, then we will investigate that in the same way as it were our own land. It is the private landowner's responsibility to remove it, and clearly there is a cost for those persons, parties, where that's the case. And I would think that there are a reasonable number who just deal with it pragmatically and don't report it and take it on the chin, as it were, and deal with it themselves.
Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, just a question on the statistics and prosecutions. If it's such a problem with people testifying against neighbours for fly tipping, why aren't procedures put in place to allow them to anonymously testify? Because fly tipping is a blight that affects people across the borough, and I know from personal experience, having residents approach me, whenever there's anything to do with antisocial behaviour, crime, fly tipping, whatever, they are always afraid to speak out for fear of repercussions with their neighbours. So why have we not got more robust schemes in place to assist conscientious residents in reporting what is antisocial behaviour in the form of fly tipping?
don't actually know the exact answer to that, but it's a question we'd have to ask legal. There will be an answer, and I can get legal to do a written response to this committee. I mean, there is probably an answer under the Police and Crime Act or some act or something, but I can certainly look into that for you and let the committee know through the chair an answer to that.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you as well, both portfolio holder and Reece, for the report. And can I also put on record our thanks and appreciation to the teams who actually go out there and clean up these incidents of fly tipping. It's not a job I don't think any of us would particularly want to do as a first point of instance, but it is an incredibly important job keeping our borough clean, tidy, and a place that we love and respect. And I think our thanks should go to that team from this chamber tonight. I want to ask a question in regards to the table in front of us, and throughout the whole report actually, that we've got the numbers of we've got the number of instances, and you've given some reasons as to why you believe that there are some discrepancies, that there may be cases of multiple reporting. That's by the by. The one thing that you don't have in here, which I think is incredibly important, is the cost. Nowhere in this report does it say this is the cost to clean up fly tipping in the borough for those years. Have you got them with you tonight? And if so, could we have them, please?
We don't collect data on costs for the collection and removal of fly tipping. That's something that perhaps colleague Dave could better answer in terms of the resource implication and what that might mean. In terms of the incidents that we remove through the year, that data we report to DEFRA, as you know, and as part of that and the data that we submit to DEFRA will subsequently calculate that up into a cost per type of fly tip that we're reporting, and there is a figure associated with that, and that covers the collection, removal and disposal of the waste. So the combined cost of what dealing with fly tipping means for us and the Waste Disposal Authority in Hampshire County Council. But we don't have an individual cost for what it reflects, or what it costs the Borough Council to remove.
Did you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. I can't add too much to what Reece has just said. We don't have a unit cost as such for fly tip removal. Essentially, it's a resource cost. A fly tip can take anything from 20 minutes to remove up to a whole day with probably 3 or 4 people. So I think going forward what we'd like to do is to obviously get some more granularity around the individual incidents and try and associate a specific cost to them. The cost of disposal is 0 because we're not charged at the disposal site, so it is really basically a resource cost. For costing purposes, we use approximately a cost, including overheads, of around about £65 an hour, and that's to fund a team of 2 operatives. So if, for example, a fly tip took half hour, then we're looking at roughly about £30. Equally, that cost could be 4 or 5 operatives over the course of a day, and indeed, in some cases, relatively few might add, that might actually take a couple of days, and then we may have to actually engage professional contractors to support us, particularly in instances where there is asbestos or other hazardous waste. So the costs vary from relatively small amount to considerable. I think there is some merit though, and given the importance of fly tipping, that we do some work to actually get some more granulation and actually break the cost down so we have that better information.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be very well received from everybody across the chamber. It's all well and good saying these are the numbers in terms of the number of incidents, but we need a cost attached to that, because then that gives us the immediate data that says is the budget that we've set aside to tackle fly tipping sufficient or not? And actually that leads on to my next question, which is, Hayley, whereabouts in this does fly tipping come out of your budget? Does it come out of street cleansing, or does it have a specific pot for fly tipping cleanup? Or do you just take it out of the pot as a whole?
It's my understanding it comes out of the street cleansing thing budget, and moving on from what Dave, or following on from what Dave's just explained, I agree with you that it would be helpful to have the cost, but I think it'd also be really difficult to try and get the cost. And having been out with the teams a couple of times, they're employed to do that. Let's say because they were collecting litter as well. So the first thing we did was went and met the litter picker at the top of town at 8 o'clock in the morning and collected all the sacks he'd been collecting since 7 o'clock. Then on the way to all the bins in Brighton Hill, we saw a bed on the side of the road. So the three of us chucked that into the back of the van. But, you know, how much did that cost? They're already being paid to go and collect the litter bins. It took us 5 minutes between the three of us. So it will be really difficult. But I think what Dave is saying, if we can look at ways to get an idea with the cost, but I just think we need to go very careful that it's not going to be an exact science because of how it's collected. And, you know, we were collecting all the litter. We picked up that bed. We were going to Chinham Incinerator anyway. So, and they're being paid to collect that litter. So actually, of course, there was a cost to that, and there's a cost to Hampshire County Council of disposing it, but it's just going to be really hard. And then throughout the day we got a call to say somebody had dumped a tyre in the Moore Memorial Park. Well, none of the operatives could pick that up because it was a tractor tyre, so then they have to go and send a tractor out. Well, that's going to cost loads of money, and that is that somebody going out specifically to do that, so you could cost that quite easily. So it's just, I think it's something we need to look at. And but no, fly tipping is just part of the whole street cleansing operations team budget.
Okay, I think I saw Councillor Day next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask if there was a correlation between originally when households wanted to have items collected from their homes, it was about £10, I recollect, and then probably about 5, 6, 7 or 8 years back we put it up to £20. Is there a direct correlation in the increase in fly tipping to the cost that we now charge? In other words, you know, people may find that £20 is a little bit too much. That's my question, yeah.
Don't believe there is. The bulky waste charges were only increased very slightly this year in line with inflation. We didn't want to put them up, so they just increased as they had to. Actually, if you compare it to other boroughs across the country, our bulky waste charges are actually very competitive and very reasonable. And then we do give concessions to people on low wages, benefits, etc. And I think that's nearly half the price. And we are always keeping an eye on that. We always do work with trying to push people towards charities to get rid of other things. If obviously I know it's not always possible, but if it is possible and the items can be taken, then often charities now will then collect them. But we are always looking at bulky waste, but it was only just this year, or the last financial year, where we tended to make a slight profit on the bulky waste. But actually, if you look at that over my whole budget, it isn't really a profit, and it was very tiny. Whereas since I've had the portfolio, there's always been a loss on bulky waste. So again, it's trying to work out. I don't believe that any bulky waste charges have seen a massive increase in fly tipping. I don't think that's the issue.
I think we have Councillor Harvey next.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also just add, commend the teams and see them in action, knowing exactly what they do, both on our land and the point I'm going to make on land that isn't ours. I think it needs to be said, and it's important. It's also from the environmental health officers that go out and deal with face-to-face issues that we know well from casework, and as much as the teams. And I know, Hayley, your brief, that clearly comes across. Just the issue here is just the reality set against what we're actually dealing with. And I think we can throw figures at this, and it is important that the figures have gone up, Chair. I think that is something to recognise, and I know the explanations that are given, but they have increased. And I find it kind of surreal that we're celebrating a dramatic increase in reporting at the same time as seeing an increase in... I know why you're doing it, I understand the context that you're trying to set it in, but at the same time there is also a reality to this. And as a ward member, I noted the size, the van loads, the car loads, the element that's in the paperwork, the nature of what you're dealing with, the size of it. I also noted the figures in terms of the kind of waste that's being fly tipped, the change in that, the nature of that. And I also note, and this is really important, where it is, because it's already been referred to this evening, that which is on our land. But I know from the issues that we face with the LSVT transfer, and even with GIS it's impossible, you get a situation where you literally, whose land is it anyway? And you're faced with commercial waste that's dumped in a garage area that we don't own, the housing associations don't own, the county don't own because it's off the highway. Who owns it? Well, nobody owns it, because you can't get hold of who the actual people are in the individual garages to clear it, and you're left with a dilemma. What do you do? So months go by before something actually happens, and it's our team that we have to rely on. Sometimes we have to chase. Most times we absolutely get a superb response, and it's not the fact that we're chasing them, it's the chance that they're so busy doing other things that they then have to come in and clear up other people's mess. And that is a serious point that we're facing here, I think, not just an issue with our land. Just take one week, for example, just randomly taking 1 week, 33 cases in 1 week of fly tipping reported, 5 cases a day. 11 of them were on other people's land. The name that kept coming up on a regular basis, Sovereign. It's Sovereign's land, it's Sovereign's land, it's and so on. The calls that then came back in a few weeks later were that we had it reported here, it had come through to our call centre, the call centre had logged it, nothing had been done about it, Sovereign hadn't lifted a finger to do anything about it, despite it coming into our call centre. And what happens? The residents are ringing up a few weeks later saying it's still there, and in fact, if anything, more things have arrived. So there's an issue there with the multi-agency element of land ownership and who's responsible for what. But I just do want to say the commendation to the teams that go out there and actually do the job of clearing up the mess. Because sometimes it is about picking up rubbish from other people's land. The point within this, and this is the budgetary issue, I get all of that, but the point with this is there is an increase, a serious increase in fly tipping. We're seeing it in casework. That's genuine. Whether it's reflected in the figures in the way you put the context, I get that, but it's not the reality I'm seeing on the ground across the town and across the borough. I think the issue is, what are our partners going to do to step up to this? Because they do have a very much part of a role to play here. I think the other aspect is, what do we do with those areas of land that genuinely nobody will own up to? Because it does involve us sometimes having to take the bullet and deal with it. But that really is putting in position on our team. There's also the safety issues I'd like to raise. The points that in those instances, in some of the cases, it's our operatives' health and safety, and they are brilliant at what they do, that then gets an issue with what's being dumped commercially, for example, or what's being dumped there, because you just don't know, and they're dealing with it, and they are brilliant at what they do, but that is an issue in itself, the sorts of waste that we're seeing. I would also say that Hampshire do not help themselves with any of this. I think what they've done at the tip in the past period has led to a huge issue relating to this. Be that the commercial waste in terms of putting them off, the charges they've introduced, because a lot of the stuff I'm seeing is stuff that would otherwise previously not have been charged and people would have gone down the tip and taken it. So I don't know where the general dealing of the issues is compared to just the figures being thrown at us. And I think this is a piece of work we need to have undertaken, really, a grasp hold of this, really. And I'm not saying that you're not. All I'm saying is the level of casework we're seeing, it is significant, and we need to do something about it far more, because it's becoming a major one in the postbag, an absolute major one in the postbag.
Okay, thank you for that. I think there was a couple of questions in there. The team really, the operations team, as you accept, they really do work hard. And if you drive around the borough, there isn't huge amounts of fly tipping, and we do respond really quickly. In the specific cases that you refer to, I can't comment on specifically. I don't know enough about them, but I do know that as the time has gone on in the last year and Dave's been on board, we have become better and better at working with the housing associations, and I'm confident with the meetings I have regularly with Dave that relationship will just continue to improve. And I think that's something we need to continue to push, is their responses to clearing a fly tipping, because they are landowners, they do have a duty to clear it, and they should clear it, and they're companies that probably can send out the contractors to do so, and that's something we'll continue to monitor. I do know when there is areas of maybe of blurred ownership that maybe a tiny bit belongs to Basingstoke, we do actually end up clearing it, where if it's definitely not our land, then the teams will do some digging around to try and find who does own it, and they will insist that it is cleared, and they've got powers to do that. So we are doing absolutely everything we can, and I'm confident that the teams are doing that, and that's ongoing, and this really has come to the forefront in the last year, and I think that work will just continue and take on board everything you say. I think the other issue was, what was the other thing? I think that's, is there anything else? I think it was mainly everything. But yeah, the other issue, there was an issue. I do want to shout about the people reporting incidents. I think it's great. I think it's a good thing that the community feel that they have got ways to go and report fly tipping. You can walk around other areas and there's mattresses lying around and they've probably been there a long time, and residents may not have the ability to have the reporter apps like we do, or be able to report like they do here. And I do think we have to put that in a positive light, that we do have CPSOs that if they see a fly tip, they'll do what they can to investigate it, they report it. They don't just walk past it and think, oh, it's not my job, or it's not been reported by a resident. They will actually deal with it. So, but I'm not trying to downplay the fact that we do have all these fly tips and it is a really serious issue. I'm just trying to put the figures into context and make people understand that the increase may not be as bad as it looks.
There's just one example of one resident's experience of ringing up the council and saying, can I report some fly tipping, please? To be told that it isn't our land. And yeah, but I don't know whose land it is. Well, neither do we. You need to investigate it. You're the resident, you living there. You need to find out whose land it is. But I don't know whose land it is. We can't help you. It's not our land. To be asked, can I have an incident number, please? Well, no, because it's not our land, so I can't give you an incident number. That was a surprising case, really, and I found that very disappointing. That's just one example. I mean, I'm sure in the context of it, it's an absolute exception. But nonetheless, that was a resident's experience of trying to deal with the it's not our land issue. Whose land is it? And I do acknowledge, and I want to put it on record, the work our teams do in that context, because they do deal with it when we do chase it as councillors. But when residents face it themselves, that is another issue. And we can't be there picking up 3,000, all of us, in our wards. We can't chase every single individual case down. We try as hard as we can, I'm sure, but we can't. So when the residents do expect a standard, I think we've got to live up to it, even if it isn't our land. That does present an issue. I respect that.
Yeah, from my experience and speaking to residents, that does seem an exceptional circumstance, so there may have been confusion, but I think Dave's probably got some more information.
Yes, thank you. I think over the past year we've done a lot of work internally with the various different teams in the council, both the operations team, community safety, the contact centre. We've engaged with our own legal team, and not least obviously Reese's team. So I think we're in a much better position now than what we were perhaps a year ago. We're far more joined up. I think there are opportunities for us to expand externally and engage some of our local partners, such as the housing associations, and I certainly recognise the picture you describe about the complex land ownership issues. We've tried to take a more robust approach probably in the last 6 months with some of the external stakeholders, and we've actually got a far slicker process now in place where we can actually go through the land registry inquiries and ascertain who is the responsible landowner. Now, in some cases, there are complex situations where there may be a garage forecourt area where there could be 20 individual owners. Now, quite clearly, in those situations, it's very difficult to try and get any one or collective of residents to actually remove the fly tipping. So I think we're taking a fairly pragmatic approach that, you know, in many respects, we are the organisation of last resort. We represent all the residents of the borough, and sometimes there is a bigger picture here insofar as there's a community benefit for us to intervene and make the problem go away. In some cases, though, there are some fairly well-established landlords, managing agents, and what we've tried to do is to cajole those, I think is probably the right word, over the past 6 months to take responsibility. And what we're starting to see are some of those landlords and some of those managing agents actually step up to the plate. So we're optimistic that we can make some progress in engaging some of the external partners. So that's that. Yep.
Can I, before we come, can I just check I've understood those answers correctly? So I appreciate that the answers where the land ownership is unclear, but where we're clear who owns it and it's not us, then, and it's not highways, then, but we're clear, then it's not the street cleaning team's role to take it over, but it is environmental health's role to make sure that the private owner gets on and does something about it. Is that what we've just been told?
Yeah, well, it's very much in collaboration with the operations team. So those reports, they should come through, they should be captured. So I think we can look at those, and if there are individual circumstances you become aware of, then please feed them through to the team, because I think there's maybe a training need for the contact centre staff just to be addressed. They should be captured. Clearly, we don't want to leave residents not knowing who to turn to if they want to try and get something done about the problem. So they should be captured, and certainly the teams will respond to those incidents and establish who the landowner is and try and get it resolved.
Thank you. I thought that was the question.
Very quickly, it's also for the example of those commercial groups or entities that do the dumping. Capturing them and the prosecutions, I think, is incredibly important. And actually, sometimes, it was interesting with the use of CCTV, because in the context of you using CCTV, it is incredibly useful, and I know that has been a tool. Can I just say and put on the record, Chair, if you don't mind?
Is this still a question?
It is very quickly. In terms of this, the Environmental Health Department's use of CCTV is one thing. I know colleagues have struggled, because of the success of environmental health, dealing with the ASB side. And I think that's something I would like to put on note, please, that from an antisocial behaviour point of view, the use of CCTV is a tool that should be used. It shouldn't just be a matter used in fly tipping because it does work. You've proven it works. So I would like to see it encouraged, if possible, please, Tommy, you can think about this from a policy point of view, of using the CCTV tool to the effect you do on the ASB issue, and colleagues would appreciate that.
Do you want to comment on that? Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question in regards to fly tipping reports by ward, which I asked officers this question a while ago. They are probably aware of it, but other members of the council may not. For example, resident could live in, and let's pick any ward at random, Chinham, and drives to Kingsclear, spots some fly tipping, goes home and reports it. I was told by officers that that would reflect against the Chinham statistics, not the Kingsclear statistics, because we reference who made the fly tipping report in the stats. Could you confirm that that is actually the case, please?
That's not my understanding of how the data will be recorded. It's against the location where the fly tip is reported. I don't know, perhaps if there's been a misunderstanding at some point, and perhaps that's something we can...
So I have an email from officers that says there are cases where person living in Ward A reports an issue in Ward B, Ward A gets reported as the location of the fly tip, which I think is rather perverse and wrong. It should be the other way round, and yeah, all I'm saying is this needs to be looked into to ensure the accuracy of it is reported correctly.
Yeah, I think if we look into that outside of this committee, if you let us have the email, we can, because looking at officers now and from what Reece has just said, and it's my understanding, because the way they map it is in the area, so it would be against where the fly tip was, not where the report was. So we can certainly, if you want to get in touch with us after, then we can look into that.
Right, I've reached the end of questions. If you look on page 31, the paper is presented for information and its contents for noting and discussion. As ever, there were a few points in the questions which I have been trying to log on this case as we go. So if I can tell you what I've captured already, and then you can tell me if there's anything you want, or indeed anything you want deleted from what I think. I think we'd all like to thank the operating teams for the excellent work they're doing. I mean, that's generous, so thank you. We'll record that in the minutes. We are grateful for the promise to get us an answer about whether people could testify anonymously. We think that's important. We look forward to that. We're grateful for the offer to do some more work on costs, and we look forward to hearing about that. We're pleased to hear that we are making progress with our partners, particularly the housing associations, and we hope that will continue. And I think, picking up the point, we are also think it's important that we do take action, the action that we can as a council, where fly tipping is reported on land that is clearly in private ownership. So I think that was a point that came out. I mean, it will help to reassure the landowners, and if we actually do have powers to encourage people to remove the the fly tipping off their own land, then we should be active in that. I don't think officers disagreed with that as being something that can be done, so I think we can say it. And on the last point, we would like confirmation as to whether fly tipping is recorded by the ward data is based on where the fly tip is rather, or where the person who reports it is. But if it's the latter, we think it should be the former. It should definitely be where the fly tip is. And I think you again also think that's what it should be, but we'd be grateful if you check, and if it isn't, make the necessary change. Now, is there anything else out of this that you want us to capture? Because I think that was the point that came out. Was that a hand, Councillor Cousins? Or?
Sorry, I'm just sat here thinking one thing that I didn't get a chance to ask, and I apologise, was that since 2014-15 to budget year 17-18, we've cut street cleansing by £30,000. And I wanted to see whether we thought that had an impact on fly tipping as well, that the cutting of the budget might have played a role in it.
Someone will answer?
No, I don't believe so at all. As I say, the teams, and speaking to Dave regularly, they're not under pressure they're keeping up with clearing the fly tipping. Evidence really does show that it's cleared within a day. The next day, worst case scenario, obviously there's the exceptional circumstances which Councillor Harvey has raised about blurred ownership and difficulty, but then the teams will do what they can. But no, I don't think that 30,000, I mean, it's a massive budget, and we looked at that carefully, and I don't believe for 1 minute it's had an impact on the teams, and the teams aren't feeding that back.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Gardner.
You kindly said that the appreciation of the committee to the operatives would be noted in the minutes. I would like you as chairman to communicate this directly to the operatives so that they are well aware that the committee are very appreciative of their efforts.
Would you like to just clarify exactly how you mean directly? You mean write or go to their Christmas party, or what would...
I think an email will be sufficient.
Can I maybe just suggest, Dave might tell me off for this, but they do a monthly newsletter. It's not done every month, but I get it as regularly as possible. It may be just as Claire could put a small thing to say that this was discussed, and we all praise their work and appreciate it, etc.
If that's okay with Dave, I will ask the minute taker to make sure that's recorded in the minutes, and I will, unless the next one is about to be published, because I'm about to go on holiday, I will make sure it's in the next one. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me. Did you capture the points about the County Council and Wade Road in your commentary at all? Because I think we should. I think that, at least from the impression from residents and from the concerns that are raised with us, that is a contributing factor. And what the County Council has done in charges there should be something that we have concern about and register that concern. I know Cabinet Member has already communicated that on numerous occasions, but we should not forget it tonight.
No, we can mention something, but that is another issue that has been in motion at full council, and now we've had the County Council elections, and I know who the portfolio holder is for waste again, looking at setting up a meeting quite soon to talk about all the permits and the ongoing issues and the strategies just coming into play, but certainly... And I think that'll be another issue for this committee later this year as well. So I think we can note it, but also it can be part of the discussions at the next meeting as well, if that's okay.
Yes, I think we should note that we are concerned about the potential impact of the changes in service that have already happened at and the thought that there might be even more. But we are due on our proposed work programme next meeting, July, to discuss the proposal that came up that we should seek to take over management of the HWRC, in which case we could set these rules for ourselves. So this will definitely, we are expecting a report for the next meeting which will inevitably cover the changes if we're going to, because that was the driver for considering taking it over.
The case, Chair, and obviously if the County Cabinet Member finds a strategy down the back of a sofa, because they haven't got one at the minute, it would certainly help if that was also at the July meeting, wouldn't it? I don't know whether it is or not, but if they can, you never know, they might find a strategy for once.
July meeting, but we'll have an update by then, and then probably some much more detail for...
Okay, it's currently on the work programme for July, so you'll have to let me know that.
Update.
Okay, right, we're moving on to item 9. Everybody move around again, please. And we should now be on to Councillor bound as portfolio holder. The word leisure, it's triggered a Pavlovian reaction. They all got off for a lie down. I'm trying, yes.
I want us to try and do it in the knees.
I'm just checking. We probably should just continue rather than, because the slides are available for anyone who's not back in by the time we get to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check that the slides are ready. Yes, they are. So it's a very brief introduction from me with slides, which isn't what I normally do, but it's great to have some pretty pictures with things that are going to come through. And as far as the new extension, as far as leisure management arrangements, really these. Oh, Mike. So this is the trick of having somebody doing the slides the other end. Thank you, Mike. As far as looking at why have we got this report in front of us with the leisure management arrangements coming to a plan finish in 2018, and then really looking at how we extend those arrangements with the redevelopment of the leisure park on the horizon. So very much looking at the facilities that are the Aquadrome, Tadley Pool, the golf centre and the tennis provision. So really looking at the contract extension principles that we've got, which are very much around continuity of service and ongoing commitment to a commitment to revenue and capital expenditure. So it's not just keeping things as they are, it's very much focused on improvement. And as that third point says, that improvement and really looking at guaranteeing the management fee going forwards. If we were to then look at what the Trust and Serco have done as far as their approach, they've been really looking at how they improve the service to customers and residents of Basingstoke and the rest of the borough, improve the financial performance of the contract for us as a borough council, and drive down the cost of delivering the service, and to extend the strong reputation that the partnership has locally. If we were to then look at the service offerings in those different places, as far as improvements for Tadley gym at the swimming pool, 200 metres squared floor space equating to a 400 station gym. Latent demand shows that there's latent demand for around 1,400 members, and the business case works on 1,200 for the 40 station gym. Virtually no competition within a 10-minute drive radius, and utilises the existing changing facilities that are at Tadley Pool. If we look at Adventure Golf, one of my personal favourites in this proposal, not only from a childhood of playing adventure golf by the seaside, but really from experience looking at how adventure golf has really engaged with communities in this country as far as getting engagement and participation up, not only in adventure golf, but also in things like the driving range and the golf course. So it would be an absolutely great addition to the golf centre. So upgrading the mini golf facility, targeting 25,000 visits per annum, and looking at increasing the number of rounds that are provided. the aquadrome and looking at where the lagoon is at the moment. For those of you that have used the lagoon recently, what you will notice is that first bit as you go in is very, very, very busy with young families and really seeking to improve that provision. So absolutely for the 0 to 5-year-olds, that you've got quite a lot of space. You can see in the pictures here on the slides what that will look like as far as additional slides by the baby beach, interactive play features, utilising the plant and filtration systems that are already there, and really creating an extra space for an additional 20 people. So if we then look at what we have for the rest of the aquadrome, if we look at the specifics for the gym, looking at having more environmental control over the gym, because we do have an issue in that stairwell for those people who know the aquadrome as far as heat moving up and down the building. So that's very unhelpful. So looking at managing that, making it more energy efficient, looking at reducing peak time issues so that we can improve attrition, new kit throughout on all of the stations, new flooring and decoration, and increasing the number of stations from 120 to 140 at the Aquadrome gym. And then what we have is just a diagram that shows you the timescales as far as what the plan is once we've received the comments from the committee. And probably the only other thing that I would add in addition to the slides is really why am I able to talk to such great pictures? Really, it's the hard work of Mike, who's done a great job as far as not just looking to extend the contract, but some really brilliant improvements to these facilities, and also to thank the members who attended the MAP, Councillor McCormick, Councillor Day and Councillor Edwards. So very much open to your comments and questions.
Questions? Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Reading the report and obviously seeing where it came from, the Members' Advisory Panel and the work that's gone on, again, can I commend the work that's been done by officers and the Cabinet Member in bringing this forward. I guess the issue that I've got, Simon, with this one is you've got a piece of work here that relates to some very important facilities in our borough that gives them a sense of longevity, a sense of renewal and a sense of investment. That's fine. But in 1.3, you talk about, quite rightly, the uncertainties raised by the leisure park scheme. And I guess it's the chicken and the egg. Here we are looking to do some significant work with much valued, much loved, much used facilities, and we haven't got a clue. Members haven't been briefed for over a year now on the progress of the leisure park negotiations. The council leadership, and I don't mean cabinet, the council leadership have chosen not to brief members. Now, I don't know whether you've been briefed as a cabinet member. I don't know what you know as a cabinet. I don't know what the senior leadership know or do not know in the context of New River Retail. I know as a backbencher, I know absolutely nothing beyond the briefing that was put forward previously, publicly, on this issue. Now, I have a real problem with that, and I think this committee, this overview committee of the council, has a duty, and perhaps, you know, in a sense, it deserves, actually, to have an update report a year on from somebody, somewhere, on where we are with New River Retail, so that the public know and have a right to know. Because this is good. This is something that has value. And where does this sit with what their bright ideas are for turning it into a retail park? And we know we can debate that, and you know our views on that very, very strongly. But you're looking to do some pretty good things with the aquadrome. You're looking to do some good things with the gym. You're looking to do some good things with a variety of the services that would relate to what goes on there. So I don't know whether through yourself or through the chair, I'd like to publicly ask that this committee on its work programme has an update, a direct update in detail, some actually substance to it. Not a, we're really sorry we can't tell you anything, but actually some substance to what's going on with New River Retail and why, after a full year, because we're way over, forgive me, Chair, what I mean by that is we're way over the timescales. Those timescales that members were given publicly, we are way past them in the context of where these negotiations, or whatever, should or shouldn't be.
All I can say is probably I have got a lot of empathy with that situation from being a position of a ward member and backbencher before I was in the cabinet. I am more than happy to take that forward to my cabinet colleagues who are responsible for where we are with that project. either on my own or with the chair to turn around and say, do you know what, it's absolutely something that needs to happen. I think when just wanted to relate it directly to this piece of work, one of the things that myself and Mike have been very focused on is to try and ensure that, if you like, the furthest date is something that's still practical. So that's really where our focus has been, but more than happy to take with the chair the request that says, can we have some information and a brief about where we are with the leisure park?
Yes, fine. I'm just checking. It was January 2016 that it was last here, so that's well over 12 months ago. But we do, you know, yes, we will. See if everybody's happy. We will, well, the portfolio is already happy to take it away. We will take it away. For the moment, it'll be an item to be timetable because we will have to double check where, you know, there may be stages in the negotiations where if we wait a month, we'll get a much better report with more information. So we won't, and we've got quite a lot in July as well. So we may get it in July, but we will certainly take away to find out when we can have a report. Yes, Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed on your comment about the Tadley Gym proposal, it's stated here on your slide, virtually no competition within a 10-minute drive, 10-minute drive radius of the Tadley pool. Did you actually take account, or was it taken into account, the Hurst Leisure Centre, which, of course, are also looking at improving their facilities, including their gym? I mean, you know, you could argue that maybe they're complementary, the two, but I know I've been approached by the the Hurst Leisure Centre, who are concerned, or have some concern, about upgrading the swimming pool in Tadley to include a gym, which of course may well result in their loss of membership and so on of their facility, which is important to them, because not only does the Leisure Centre in Tadley just do gym, it provides a lot of other community activities in the centre, a lot of you know, sort of extracurricular learning exercises, this sort of stuff, looking after toddlers, mother and care things, all these sort of things go on there as well. But the gym does provide an income that they really depend upon, and I just wondered what considerations had been given to the Hurst Leisure Centre.
I was quite happy to start the answer, really, because I know it has been taken into account, and I know there have been quite a few conversations with them, absolutely, because of the importance of the revenue, also the importance that becomes very clear, even if we were to look at the proposals with the Aquadrome gym, as far as maintaining equipment and replacing equipment and keeping it up to date. And I know there's certainly a conversation with officers, not only around is it competition, is it different, but also what their offer is. And I know there have certainly been conversations about, you know, is this the time for them to update their equipment? Although I also know there have been more detailed conversations to try and say, do you know what, working in partnership with them, we'd potentially look at doing different things, which may be looking at some of the maintenance issues around their building first. And it's certainly a conversation that I know officers have had as far as looking around what funding would be available to do that.
Yes, you're right in the sense that the Hurst do provide an important community service, not just in terms of the health and fitness, but the wider community offer as well. So as soon as we became aware of the potential for these proposals, we did get in touch with the Hurst and said, look, there's a latent demand study that shows that there's a need in this area, and in responding to that, we can create a situation which is a win-win for the residents of Tadley, and also enable some of the criteria that we set for the contract extension to be met as well, primarily around the management fee, etc. So we sat there and said, clearly, we don't want to do this in isolation of what you're doing. So there's a number of choices, really. One is to either help you up your game, so it's more of a level playing field, so all the residents of Tadley benefit. And the offer from the Hurst School is slightly different. It has more of a sports hall, it's got more studio space, it's got, if you like, different facilities that, as you say, quite rightly, could complement some of the wet and dry type provision that you normally experience in other places. So there's no guarantees, obviously, but we are working with them to put together a lift funding bid. We, as Councillor Barnes has alluded, we've supported them in trying to harness exactly what it is that they can do and how they can complement what has been provided or been suggested or proposed at Tadley as well. So we hope, appreciate it means that school have probably had, if you like, a comfort zone around this for quite a while. We'll need to respond to that, and we hope that they will do so, and we will encourage them to do so, not to maintain their market share, but also to tap into this latent demand that we know we have evidence that exists in Tadley at the moment. So not the exclusion of, but complement what's provided in Tadley. That's what we're looking to do.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, can I just make a comment? Yes, no, thank you for that. I mean, I think they will need some support in applying for a lift. That's the thing, and you can confirm that you are actually going to go ahead with that. Yeah, I think that is important. Thank you.
Councillor Rowland, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chair. This is on a similar vein in terms of competition. Were planning officers aware of the Adventure Golf proposal? Because at the April DC, with residents, parish and ward objections, an officer had approval, and it went through a committee, for an adventure golf course to be built at Wyvale Garden Centre in Wildmoor Lane. The whole premise around that was that there was no facility in the area of Basingstoke which would deliver an adventure golf course. I am so frustrated by this. I don't know whether this is the right forum to bring it up, but I am seething, to be honest. There is a question in there. Did the planning officers know about this?
If I'm honest, we became aware of it when planning permission was granted for the indoor adventure golf centre in Sherford and Loddon. Sorry, beg your pardon. Thank you. Now, clearly, it's an indoor facility. What we're proposing here is an outdoor facility. I beg your pardon. Okay, I've seen. Is it outdoor then? Is it okay? So that needs a bit more work to be done. That we have, if you like, recognised that there could well be two. I appreciate that might create a different dynamic in terms of, as you say, the competition and the fact that 1 minute there was not one within 32 miles away. I think it was Wokingham. And suddenly you've got two within 3 or 4 miles of each other. Our initial understanding was that it was indoor, but now you've clarified that, so we need to go away and have another look at that and establish what is the right approach to take going forward.
I just also wanted to add, as a regular user of the Hobridge Golf Centre Adventure Golf in Woking, that it's also, interestingly, a very different offer, which is why I talk about participation. There is something very powerful about having adventure golf next door to a driving range, next door to a golf course. As far, the reason why I'm so passionate about it is every single member of my family who have always been against sport and physical activity do adventure golf now. They do pitch and putt. They do driving range. Every single member of my family goes there, and I think that's one of the things where I think this has absolutely got a huge impact as far as getting people involved in leisure and sports activity which they hadn't considered in the past. Because golf hasn't necessarily had a very good sort of appreciation in the past, and I think that's something that's potentially different from a standalone adventure golf course, which to my mind may put more into question the viability of what they're planning, because absolutely our offer is going to be much more strong and appeal to a wider range of audience, because there are lots of other things to do there as well.
Thank you, Chair. Exactly, and that's why I supported this golf course, and I didn't want the planning to go through for the previous golf course in Wildmoor Lane, because there is no seating facilities, there are no toilet facilities, there are no facilities for the care of children on that site.
I will come back to that. Councillor Harvey, I think we're still questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up that point, and maybe Simon needs to declare an interest in the number of people that use the family side. I mean, trust me, someone growing up with a seafront down the road, I know exactly what you mean. in terms of lessons learnt from this, what we're hearing tonight is a communication point. And this isn't a criticism of this, but you've done your work, which is really, really good. And here's the planning department advising a planning committee on a particular application where they should have known. And if they didn't know, why didn't they know? And there's also the point that you related to earlier, which was the way that you've actually gone about talking with the trust in Tadley and also the school in Tadley in the context of the relationship they need to have, the relationship they do have, and in a sense, that positive way of doing it. Now, there are quite a number of examples I can point to where at the moment this council is not engaging in the way that it should do with other trusts. And your example stands out as the example of actually the practice I'd like to see, where you do actually look at the competition impact and you do look at the consequences of the decisions that this council makes. So on a flip side to this, I'm concerned about the example to do with planning, and I'm also concerned that you've given an example of good practice that then I see not going on in another area of this authority, in incredibly bad practice, and in fact very worrying practice, and I mean specifically in regard to the Sports Centre Trust. So in that context, Chair, I think as a learning point, as a comment to capture, it is that the senior leadership team need to take that away and start thinking about how this council communicates on these issues, because quite clearly the left hand isn't talking to the right hand in the context of a number of these issues, and it is disturbing when we're talking about the scale of things that we're actually talking about.
The senior leadership team would like to respond, I think.
I think...
Sorry.
Oh, apologies. Oh, it is. I think it might be just worth making the comment on the example that was raised in terms of planning, because clearly there are set planning policies within our local plan in terms of demand, and planning officers have to have regard to that. So clearly we can take away members' comments in terms of communication. I think timing here may have been an issue, because planners will have to look at the application that's in front of them, and even though this report was travelling through the process, it hasn't yet been signed off and agreed by Cabinet, and therefore, unfortunately, in terms of timing, even if there is a suggestion or a plan to do a similar facility elsewhere, the planners are, unfortunately, having to follow policy in terms of what's in front of them. But what I would suggest is that we get some written comments from planning in terms of what they would have looked at in terms of policy, in terms of that application specifically, and we can always circulate that to committee.
So Ryan would like to come back first.
Absolutely, I'll defer.
Thank you. So I completely understand. However, what will now happen is this much superior facility will actually now take the Wildmoor Lane facility into a situation where it could not be viable, and therefore that causes more problems in my ward.
Thank you, Jack. I completely agree, and I think the issue as well with the planners is that they would have had an obligation through a sequential testing process to analyse, as you rightly say, which was the stronger offer, which was the stronger that should have been then a material consideration within the planning application, because you can only judge that which is in front of you, and that which is in front of you needs to be tested against that which is out there. Therefore, if this was known about, which obviously it was, the sequential testing element, the benefit of doubt done by our planning officers in the writing of their report for that application could have reflected that, and I guess that's the point.
Thank you. Have we any more questions? Yes, Councillor Day.
No, I just want to compliment both Mike and Simon on this excellent piece of work, and the way forward, if you like, of how our leisure facilities are going to look in the future. And I think that's very exciting to have sat through this, and Mike and Simon have put this project together, the Aquadome. Tadley in particular, I don't know Tadley very well, but quite clearly they lacked facilities over there, and they certainly sold it to me and their work that we're going to do with the Hurst. I thought that was, again, an excellent piece of work, if we've all said now. And long-term tennis is in there, and of course, the golf, which we've just heard about, and I understand where everybody's coming from on that. But competition happens, and that's not a bad thing. At the end of the day, that's how life is. Whether it's a shop or whether it's a facility, that's competition, and that's our free enterprise, if you like. How our state is structured, and I certainly support that as well. So again, thank you all of you, and Chaz as well for his involvement, and all the team. Well done. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll do what I did last time, which is anticipate that most of the comments have been in the questions, and I'll tell you what I've captured, and then you can tell me if there's anything I've missed or you want to disagree with. So I think we want to welcome the outcome of the negotiations and congratulate officers on an excellent outcome. I mean, I do think turning a substantial annual payment into a substantial annual income and getting a lot of substantial improvements in the facilities is really excellent. So I'm sure we'd all endorse that. I think we welcome the discussions that have taken place in relation to Tadley and the Hurst, that we are seeking to support the Hurst as well as going ahead with Tadley, and in particular we welcome that they will be helped to make a lift bid, and I think we would also like to say that this is such an example of good practice that we would like to see it followed in all cases. And that picks up Councillor Harvey's point. And then I think, to pick up Councillor Rowland's point, we do need to note that concern was expressed that the planning officers dealing with an application at Wildmoor Lane did not seem to know about the proposals for an adventure golf course, is it called, or a facility? Adventure golf course at, what's the location called there?
The golf centre.
At the golf centre, thank you. And I think we just need to note that, because it may well be that, as has been explained, that the way the timings were, they couldn't have known. But I think we would like to express the concern. Do we want, and was there an offer just to let us know what the situation was? And we'd appreciate a report back on how that happened. And I think Councillor Taylor's trying to add something or delete something or...
I just wanted to make a comment. I mean, it's a while since I've been on DC, but competition is never a planning issue, surely. I mean, it's never been one. It's up to the applicant to work out what the competition is and decide whether to go ahead or not. And we will never turn anything down because of competition. That's their business, not ours. I mean, it's more important to know, you know, if the people, the applicants knew about it. That's the important thing, but that's up to them to research.
The point I picked up was that Councillor Rowland was saying that planning officers said that there was no competition. So if they said that, then there is a question as to whether they knew that, you know, whether they had the information before they made that statement. That was the point. That was right, yes?
So just to be absolutely clear, as the ward councillor and as chair of parish council and residents, we were against the application. The applicant stated that there was no competition in the local area, stating Woking was the nearest competition, and that was the situation.
Yes, okay, sorry, I was being spoken to from there. But do we need to change what I said we would put in the minutes?
I just think we need to be absolutely clear that from a ward, parish and residents, there were objections to the application for the adventure golf course at Wildmoor Lane. At the time, the applicant had said that there was no competition in the surrounding area, only at Woking.
Right, but the planning officers had not specifically endorsed that statement.
They, as I recall, they had agreed that there was no competitive offering.
Fine, I think the point stands, then we'll find out what happened. Okay, I think that is that item, if everybody's happy with that, which brings us to the last of the longer items. So, another change of portfolio holder. Cabinet members who aren't here tonight must be feeling very left out. So we're now on to item 10, Community and Voluntary Sector Grant Scheme. And Councillor Tate should be appearing.
Thank you, Chair. The report you have this evening is the programme grant funding, lessons learned from the grants operation, and lessons learned from that in terms of looking also to the way forward with some observations, so that we can perhaps build those into the next round of programme grants, which begin in 2018, which will be launched in July this year, so that we can perhaps improve the grant scheme. So the report itself looks in a little bit of detail as to the history and the background, which I think you will all be pretty clear about. But I think the question really for this is looking very much in terms of the lessons learned and observations from that in terms of how these grants are being operated and the performance of them. And some of the learning points particularly is that within, or observations, that the grants themselves have become quite complex in terms of the deliverables within the organisations. And one of the issues for this in the future is about how we perhaps look for more clarity in terms of measuring the outcomes, but also in terms of more clarity perhaps in terms of the programs themselves when they're set up. The evidence is that clearly within a lot of the programs which we're supporting, that they are very positive, but this complexity is perhaps more than when we originally started the scheme we were foreseeing. So whilst we are seeing good impacts, that's true, but equally the issue may be very much about how in the future we perhaps simplify this, but also ensure that within that the measurables are clearer, so that we can look and focus to help those that are needing the help much more clearly. Some of the themes that we're looking at also mean that we have to be looking, I think, in terms of how the grants are set up in the future, and in terms of the budget allocation, perhaps the number of grants that we are taking on board in the selection process, so that within the budget allocation which we have in total, there is a reasonable allocation per organisation. We can also perhaps look at perhaps the way that we have used the grants in the past, where we have taken an attitude which says, okay, the grants themselves are not to become dependency grants. They're grants which can be built to support a project which has a life, but that life should become self-generating in the future. So you see over a 3-year period the grants have diminished. Now we're still proposing in the next round to carry that on, but how that's managed and how that's monitored is something which we might want to consider. So I think in summary the report says that we are making a good progress, and I think we accept and understand the importance of the grants to the organisations that receive them in the voluntary sector, and that there is scope to learn from the experience so far. In the current 3 years, it was decided not to review against the depreciating amount additional grants, but that's something which may be something we might consider in the future as well. So overall, I think the grant scheme has merit. It has proven merit. There are some learning points which we're quite comfortable to take on board, and any other points which the committee choose to bring to us, of course, we'd like to bring into that as well.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Hart.
I was looking on the other side, but I'll go. Just in terms of what you've just said, Robert, in terms of the issue with the dependency element is that a lot of these are small organisations that actually, you take away the funding, then they're likely to fold. And that's the issue, because over the years, when the grants have been reduced, a number of the organisations that have fallen outside of the grant process for whatever reason, either through us changing the goalposts, them changing where the other elements of funding are coming from, has resulted in them then struggling, and a number of them going under. And that's an issue. What do we do when, for example, we've got an in-year saving again this year in the budget,
we have an example of this being a core area of good work that we rely on, because a lot of these groups are actually picking up the slack, the gaps, if you like, the vacuum that's being created by, for example, the county council cuts to adult and social care and children's services. In those issues, the decisions you make as the cabinet member then to how you grade, develop, change or allocate the money is absolutely critical. And I know you say about dependency, but like I say, for some of these organisations, actually, that is the difference between them surviving and not, and has been, as the examples we could point to.
Well, I think looking at the original concept of the grants, it's clear that what the council and the cabinet proposal were very much that there were grant schemes which would not be built to sustain an organisation, but to sustain a project. And that's what the programme grants are doing. Now, I understand that organisations, particularly in the voluntary sector, it is a difficult issue in terms of the core organisation being able to be there to deliver a programme. But the reality, I think, is that the way this scheme has been agreed and set out in the first stage says, well, the necessity is to deliver the programs. We cannot support the organisations in total. So that's where you have this differentiation. Now, when something is in a strategic grant, that's maybe a slightly different issue. But with the programme grant, it is the concept of it is actually the project. Now, unfortunately, it does mean that a voluntary organisation is under pressure, I am sure, to achieve other funding and how to do that. And there are examples where they haven't gone under as well. So I think the mechanism is we want to try and we have a limited pot. Let's be quite honest. It's not going to solve all the issues in community support. It's not big. It's not there to do that. It's not aimed to do that. It's to provide a localized project. However, within that, there is a need for to support that program. An organization needs to develop its own structure. And we cannot be in a position where we're, if you like, open-ending an agreement which says, okay, we go on forever doing something at a certain level. So I think what we're doing is clear, it's transparent, it's perhaps not ideal. I can't discuss that particularly, but I think it is a way of getting into the community funds that will help it for a specific usage. But I don't think that we can be accountable for every organization's overall ability. And in some cases, if an organization cannot market itself or find its own funding, that is going to be an issue for sure.
The issue that we have with this is that, in a sense, over the years, you have had organisations and groups where we have worked with, had relationships with, either through the old LSP as was and BASP as it is now, in terms of the structure, the way that the voluntary sector fits in with the wider environments in which our town operates, be that with the bigger organisations like the hospital, or be that the smaller organisations like BVA itself and how it's actioned and changed. And I think those relationships are part of this equation. It isn't that these things operate in isolation. They operate as a consequence of the decisions that others make in so many cases. We as well. And in other parts of the council, we make consequential decisions that impact upon these organisations. And my concern and our concern is very much that if you look at what, for example, the county council has done in its cuts to particularly those most vulnerable in our group, in our society, then you're talking about areas of adult and social care and children's social care where you see a number of these organisations literally trying to plug the hole that's been created by the choices Winchester has made, and they're at crisis point. And were they not to get the resource from this authority, and it is project funding in most cases, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes even just withdrawing that amount of money will see them dramatically struggle, and as you say, they do survive. There are many more that haven't, actually. And in that context, I think the way you go about that fine line, this is why I'm pushing you on this, is the sense your decision-making process becomes so critical to this. Because as we go forward, you're right, the situation isn't going to get any easier. In fact, if anything, it's going to get significantly worse if things continue as they are currently. And I don't know how you square that circle with the consequence that then has for our communities.
I think the response really for me is that I understand your comment and I understand the width of potential issues that could or might be dealt with a limited budget, which needs to be focused for the best benefit for us as a borough, and also for the residents who are paying their council tax. What we have, I think, are attempting and trying to do, I think, quite successfully, is produce a transparent system which says we can't do everything, but we can focus on objectives that support our community and they support the council's priorities. That doesn't say it will support any gap in any other provider. It just says what it just said. So I think that if and I believe we are providing a transparent measurement and a transparent opportunity for funding, that's pretty much what we should be doing, because otherwise we are trying to take on something which frankly we can never do, because we will never have the funding to do so.
I didn't see any other questions. This is really a comment, but I'll put it as a question because it follows on from what Councillor Harvey said. I mean, as I read sections 5 and 6, the emphasis is on saying we'll be a bit more selective this time round. We may provide higher funding for some, but a smaller number. But in particularly 6.3, it suggested that the focus aligns with current service team and partnership priorities and sector-specific strategies with particular emphasis on better outcomes for the vulnerable. These include the Health and Wellbeing Partnership, the Children, Young People and Families Partnership, the Older People's Partnership, and the Emerging Culture and Development Strategies. So my question is, doesn't that actually say that you're focusing on exactly the groups that Councillor Harvey is worried about?
Well, yes, it does, because they fit into the other earlier priorities that are measured as well, which it is generically the community. I think what I'm trying to say is it's differentiating between the whole width of things that we could deal with and trying to focus more specifically. But you're quite right, Chairman. In general, it's the same community as well.
Councillor Harvey.
Those are very big words that cover an awful lot of ground, that cover an awful lot of organisations, and I hear what the Chair says and I also hear what the Cabinet Member says, and they are actually two different things. So in that context, how those choices are made is still a relevant comment, still a very relevant comment. That then leads me to my second question, which really relates to the Anvil Trust has always had a huge slice of this pie, huge slice of it, consistently year on year for many, many years. And that was largely all those years ago because the argument was made that it would not survive otherwise. That unless this council put its hand in its pocket and stumped up the money, that the Anvil Trust itself could not operate to deliver the facility, the service that we've had. And we've always shouldered that as an authority. I note that the Basingstoke and District Sports Centre Trust grant this year is £45,000. Can I ask, has there been any contingency made? Has the Cabinet Member made any thought to what happens with the £3 million delivering the hotel on Basing View that results in the £750,000 worth of predicted loss, revenue loss year on year that the sports centre is facing when they come knocking at the door asking this authority to assist them in that? Has that been given thought to the budget? Because obviously we are giving a very clear grant and very clear support, as we rightly should, to a group like the Anvil Trust for nearly £1 million, and we now see, quite literally, I think, another organisation which we value, I'm sure we all value, is going to come knocking on this council's door when an action of this council results in them losing £750,000 a year in revenue. Are we going to pick up the tab?
So your question is, are we making a budget of £750,000 for the as a contingency? Currently, you talked about the Anvil, first of all. It's a strategic grant, and that will be reported and dealt with at another report later on. And as far as the Sports Trust is concerned, currently we have a budget in place. I can't talk to what we would do in the future. I can't tell you whether an application will be made for a strategic grant. I have no idea. So from my point of view, I can only report on what we have in front of us here at this particular moment.
If I could just push you, so as a Cabinet Member, you have had no discussion, there is no element at the moment that discusses a contingency element in any shape or form from a budget point of view that could deal with the issues that face the Sports Centre Trust as a result of the decision to build the hotel on Basing View. There is no contingency as yet that has been discussed in Cabinet in that context.
It is true to say that there has been no contingency discussed as yet in terms of Basingstoke Sports Trust. It is clear that there have been discussions, there are discussions ongoing about numerous items around the topic. But at this stage, there is no contingency that I can tell you about that is in this year, currently in a budget proposal. And bearing in mind also we're embarking on a budget proposal period now. So it may or may not be discussed in the next few months. I have no idea. That will depend on the budget discussions that take place and what proposals are put forward. But at this stage, today, there are no proposals.
And can I just be clear in relation to your fairly answer? Both the Anvil and the Basingstoke and District Sports Trust are strategic grants, so neither of them are covered by these changes to programme grants. Councillor Gardner was the next person on.
On the subject of the strategic grants and ongoing reductions, where we are budget limited, one of the things we should be considering is whether we should actually fund fewer organisations, but concentrating on making sure that the ones that we do fund are properly funded.
I think if I go back to the way the report is looking at future funding, it is I don't think I can answer your question in terms of what constitutes properly funded, but what I can tell you is that if the thrust of the report is that we should be making perhaps slightly fewer grants, but with a slightly higher level within those grants, if that approaches what you're talking about in terms of might be properly, then that's the right direction. But I think properly is a matter of personal and organisational preference, I think.
Councillor Day. I think you indicate, someone spotted you.
I did, but yeah, I think Councillor Harvey sort of covered my point anyway, so I sort of...
Good. And so, we're just trying to work out where, let me go back to what we're asked to do. On page 111, the views of the Community Environment and Partnership Committee are sought on the contents of this report, and in particular the proposed refinement to the programme grants process. And I didn't pick up any particular dissatisfaction with the process or the changes. Sorry? What?
With respect to you, that was exactly what I said. That was exactly what I said. Dissatisfaction with the process because of the consequences of it. I mean, you couldn't get away any fairly clearer than what I actually said with respect to you.
So, well, sorry, I wasn't trying to. I thought the point you were making, which was the point I wrote down, was that without grants, small organisations could fold, and that point's been recognised, and it's been recognised in here. And what was said in here is that we will be more focused, and as I said in my question, focused on the areas that particularly concern you. So the ones that may drop off are the ones that are less critical to the really important things that we as a council want to see delivered in this borough. That was how I read it.
You may well read it that way, Chair, and I respect that you may read it that way. That is certainly not what I said. And my comment is, as I said, I have dissatisfaction with the process because of the consequences that there will be for the organisations that are affected by it. The consequences of this process will be significant.
Okay. Were you wanting to propose a change to the process?
Do I want to propose a change in the process? Yes. Do I have the detail in front of me to be able to do that tonight on the hoof? No. However, I can express dissatisfaction with what is directly in front of me because of knowing, and the debate we've had, and we can go into far more detail, but the consequences of this are significant.
Fine. Well, you're not a regular attender here, or though fairly regular. We don't normally have votes because that tends to polarise things. So I'm happy to see recorded in the minutes that concerns were expressed about the potential consequences of this change without attributing any degree of support, in either way. Is that okay? Yes?
Chair, we are developing the process for the July period. I mean, if there are any written comments that anybody wants to send me in terms of how we might better the process, we have probably a window of a couple or 3 weeks where that can be built in to take on board. I can't promise the outcome, but at least we can take it on board at that stage.
Okay, we'll put that in the minutes as well, that there is an opportunity to make specific proposals for change. But we should still minute it. And is everybody okay with that? We might even finish on time, just about. Right, last item. Don't go to... Which has got very detailed, which is, I mean, the work programme stuff is growing. Let me get the right page. So the main work programme is on page 128, which records, as we had noted earlier, that at the moment the items on the agenda for July are Basingstoke Town Football Club, and I think we will certainly have to cover that in July. The evolution of local level decision-making pilot arrangements, which we're still double checking whether July is the best meeting for that, I think, but it's in it at the moment. Yes. And household waste recovery centres, which is a motion referred from Council in October 2016. And again, that would be a suitable meeting to cover it if there isn't something else large and urgent that arises, but it's not time critical, that. So we you know, if we had to, something else came up that we had to do in July in order to not miss a cabinet decision making, we might defer that. Parking in Councillor McCormick's gone. Parking in residential areas programme update. Councillor McCormick brought that to us originally, and he and I had a discussion a little while ago that yes, we would bring that back. Here he is. We would bring residential parking back as soon as we could, so it's penciled in for September. Though I have heard from officers that they had a programme of work underway which might make it better to defer it to November, but it'll be on one of those two. And then September, the big item will be the waste contract tender, consideration of market research, because that will be time critical, so we'll have to make sure that is on. And then November, at the moment, we've got something else we asked officers to bring back to us, the Town Centre Community Facilities Works, so to approve the scope of works and allocation of Section 106 funding, that should be, for improvements to Carnival Hall and the Irish Centre. So that is coming back. That should be the time it needs to come back. Yes, any comments on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the modern slavery, we were obviously meant to discuss that on tonight's agenda, but obviously we didn't. And have I missed it off of the rundown that you've just given us?
No, I think I've missed it. Am I about to be told where I... Okay, fine. Was it... Yeah, no, I think, well, sorry, I'm just coming back. After the council motion, it came, I think, to the January one, where the minutes record that it would be timetabled for discussion in the new municipal year, because I did check this up when I was preparing for the meeting, and we didn't specify when, but it should certainly be on the items to be timetabled, and it probably is. If you turn over the page, yes. If you turn over the page where the 4 items to be timetabled are, and that is the first one, and the council motion is spelled out in detail there. We haven't had a detailed discussion of what we would like officers to do. So given that both Councillor McCormick and Councillor Cousins are here, do you want to add anything to what's in the motion, or shall we just ask officers to come back with the report that they think we want based on that motion?
Chair, I think what we've got there is sufficient. I mean, there are some things that we could progress quite quickly, I think, like becoming a member of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Modern Slavery Partnership and start engaging with them. But in terms of a piece of work that needs bringing back in front of the committee, I don't think we need to add to anything that's that's already on there. It is going to be quite a serious piece of work, and you know, I look forward to it being brought before the committee in the next few sessions.
Okay. So we'd say we'd like it to come to us in July or September as fits with other work that has, because this hasn't got a time limit on it, so we don't want to miss time critical work, but we are looking for it to come earlier in the municipal year rather than late in the municipal year. Is that okay? So officers will take that away. The other items to be timetabled, the 12-month review of making every adult matter will have to be when the 12 months is up, so that isn't for a bit. Neighbourhood management, and the update on the Sleeping Rough project, we need that to have been running long enough to be worth doing a report. Neighbourhood management, I think there's a general concern that we should, understanding that we should continue the working group, because this is something we want to come back to from time to time. So if you turn on to the next page, which is 131, you'll see that the current members are Councillors Mike Band, myself, Councillor Tony Jones, Councillor Paul Miller and Councillor Mike Westbrook. Now, I have definitely confirmed that Councillor Paul Miller would like to continue. I believe Councillor Mike Westbrook would like to continue. I don't know whether Councillor Day could speak for Councillor Bound, his Councillor Bound, or would you like to replace him on the... We'll let him stay. So we'll continue the existing membership if everybody's all right with that. Fine. The other thing we should do, and it should have been on the agenda as the first meeting of the municipal year, is reappoint the tree panel. And the current members are Councillor Mike Westbrook, who is very keen to continue, Councillor Marilyn Tucker, who is usually very keen to continue with trees, so I think we can assume that. Councillor Ron Hussey, who last year was very keen to go on doing trees. Councillor Nick Robinson, who I'm pretty sure wanted, but Councillor Paul Frankham, I suspect, has other things to do this year. And although it hasn't got to be politically balanced, it works well with how politically balanced. Keep Councillor Paul Frankham, that you think he'd still like to do the tree panel. Okay, fine. In that, there's no constitutional problem with that, is there? Yeah, hang on just a minute. Just so that goes on, there is no we understand there is no constitutional objection to him to continuing on it, but Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my understanding is the mayor can go to any meeting he likes. In terms of maybe having a substitution, you know, once we've spoken to the worshipful the mayor, it would help if we got an insight into how is this a committee panel that meets often during the day, or is it something that meets during the evenings?
They're normally day meetings.
Yeah, as I thought, because that kind of rules out working councillors from it.
Yeah, okay. So we leave it the existing members, but if for any reason Councillor Paul Frankham doesn't want to continue, you will let me have a nomination, and is committee happy to delegate to me the task of formally approving that? Okay? And then we have finished, I believe, at 9:31, so that's not bad. Thank you very much.
Chair, craving your indulgence.
Yes?
Just then I had to go out. I had a phone message from Councillor Pam Loney. Unfortunately, she was taken ill with food poisoning, and I didn't get to pick up the message prior to the meeting, so craving your indulgence if that could be recorded as an apology for absence.
Thank you, that should be fine, yes. Okay, good evening everybody.